Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 591, 9 Skills of Heaven Knife. Could Cult Master Qin want to get someone else to do the dirty work? Sun Sovereign looked at Qin Mu and said unpleasantly, even though Cult Master Qin is young, he doesn't lack cleverness. Young Master Qi, don't be tricked by him. If you kill a devil, we will fall into a passive state. Qi Jui was unconcerned. Sun Sovereign, don't worry. The devils are merely dogs raised by the celestial heavens, and there's no problem if a few dogs die. Brother Qin wants to take this chance to see my abilities, and I'd like to see his too. Qin Mu smiled. Brother Qi's breadth of mind is much wider than that of Sun Sovereign. He has to speak to Brother Qi in a meek tone and worries too much. This should be because his position is much lower than yours. Brother Qi is probably from the so-called celestial heavens? And the reason you came is to find me. Qin Jui gave him a small smile. Brother Qin is intelligent. You should be called Qin Yi instead. It wasn't difficult for me to guess your motive, so I can't really be called intelligent or named Jui. When you tried to invite me to fight in eternal peace, there had to have been a reason for that. Qi Jui was secretly astonished, but on the outside, he just smiled without saying anything. Qin Mu raised his head to look at the three-legged god. Sun Sovereign, why aren't you putting your mind on the battle with Grandpa Butcher? You'll die at the first knife slash like that. Just wait and see if my words are accurate or not. Sun Sovereign snorted. Cult Master Qin wants to crush my Dao heart? Qin Mu didn't pay attention to him and looked over to the other side. He saw numerous devil experts rushing at them one after another. There were quite a number of experts on Divine Bridge Realm and those of Five Elements Realm and Celestial Being Realm. They had to have been agitated by him and couldn't resist rushing over. Devils revered martial prowess, and every divine arts practitioner of theirs was ranked among them on every realm. Qin Mu had fought some experts of Seven Stars Realm in Li City before, and they were all devil gods' disciples which were ranked top 10. Among them, Zhehuali had been ranked first. The other realms also had similar rankings. There were no divine arts practitioners of Seven Stars Realm and Six Directions Realm that came over, as basically all the experts of the two realms were killed by Qin Mu. Everyone rushed over with fierce auras, but one of the strong practitioners of Divine Bridge Realm took the lead. Everyone stopped upon seeing that. The strong practitioner of Divine Bridge Realm was already close to God Realm and was extremely strong, astonishing Granny C and the rest. They felt threatened. Even though they had patched what they were lacking in the technique, the period of time they had cultivated it was still too short. They were still slightly inferior to the experts of the devil race who had cultivated the methods of true gods ever since they were young. However, after some time, they could also train all aspects of their body to the realm of true god. Besides, the vital Qi human body network that Qin Mu had imparted to them was the door to technique entering the path. Such a thing covered all aspects to make one a true god. Not only did it cultivate the corporeal body, but also the primordial spirit, refining the vital Qi and improving the paths, skills, and divine arts. When only the corporeal body reached the level of a young true god, the person was still far from comparable to a young true god. Cult Master Qin of Eternal Peace. The gaze of that strong devil practitioner of Divine Bridge Realm fell on Qin Mu, and he said solemnly, "You don't have any opponent on Seven Stars Realm, but that doesn't mean there isn't anyone already on other realm. I, Shu Yi, Fu Riluo's disciple, is here to test you. Senior brother Shu Yi, what's your rank among those in Divine Bridge Realm?" Qin Mu asked curiously. Number 2. Shu Yi said indifferently. The first-ranked person is Tu Jun, but he's close to entering the Devil Celestial Palaces and is about to become a devil god, so he isn't participating in the battle. I will soon be number 1. Qin Mu shook his head. You should go and invite him, for you won't do. I've already killed a disciple of Fu Riluo before, Fu Yuxiao, who was on Celestial Being Realm. His abilities were very strong, yet he was far inferior to me on the same realm. Shu Yi was furious, but Fu Riluo suddenly descended from the sky. He landed in front of the numerous devils. Shu Yi and the other devil experts hurriedly greeted him. Respectable king. Fu Riluo raised his hand and signaled for everyone to drop the formalities. On the same realm, none of you are a match for little friend Qin. If you aren't ranked first on your realm, there's no point for you to make a move and die in his hands. Mute, Butcher, and the rest were astonished. A true god had descended, and even if they all rushed him together, they might still not be his match. Fu Riluo's gaze moved away from Butcher's face and landed on Mute. It then landed on Sun Sovereign before moving to Qin Mu. The youth was alarmed and hurriedly made a grab for his chest. Only then did he remember that the jade pendant was no longer hanging there. It had been pushed into his vertical eye at the heart of his brows by Earth Count. Fu Riluo saw him making a motion of grabbing the jade pendant, and his heart jumped. When he remembered the time when Qin Mu lost control, he felt his chest hurting, and he laughed. Little friend Qin, don't be alarmed. I mean no harm. I came out to be a witness. I won't lay my hands on you. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and lowered his hands from his chest. He bowed and said, Fu Riluo is a senior and always fair. I admire you. Qi Jui's gaze fell on his chest, and his heart moved slightly. He revealed a smile. He really wears that jade pendant on his neck. Since I know where it is, it's much easier. Suddenly, a remarkable beauty walked over with her face was glowing. She appeared beside Fu Riluo, and her gaze swept past Butcher, Mute, Sun Sovereign, and the rest before landing on Granny C. The glow on her face instantly dimmed. The woman was also a peerless beauty, but before Granny C, her beauty paled in comparison. One was a remarkable beauty and one was peerless beauty. It was impossible to see them as people on the same level. When Qin Mu saw the woman, he probed, Lu Li of Yudu? That's me. Lu Li looked, but a hint of jealousy took root in her heart. She smiled sweetly and acted extremely flirtatious, but her voice was as rough as that of a man. Peerless beauty, making me feel pity for you and even a hint of jealousy. How do I address this sister? Granny C was about to reply when Qin Mu shook his head and said in a low voice, Granny, Yudu's spells are targeted at the soul. If she learns your real name, she will have methods to deal with you. Granny C immediately abandoned the idea of saying her real name. Lu Li chuckled. Qin Feng Qing, I have never thought that you would actually reach such a state one day. You truly disappoint me. I was planning to get the body of this peerless beauty to play with her. Also, this noble, is your surname perhaps Qi? Qi Jui smiled at her. Qi Jui of Qi family pays his respects to Provincial Governor Lu Li. Lu Li's voice was still very rough, but her tone grew very sweet and piteous. Looks like the celestial heavens can't trust me to actually send young Master Qi as well. This makes me really disappointed. If Provincial Governor has no ill intentions, why does she care about me? Qi Jui said leisurely. Lu Li sneered. Since I'm already here, you will not bring away the one with the surname Qin. Qi Jui smiled. I have never thought of taking him away. After I finish using Brother Qin, I can hand him to you. Lu Li's eyes lit up. Deal. Qi Jui smiled without saying anything. Qin Mu frowned. Fu Riluo's action of coming forward personally had spoiled his plans. He had wanted to let Qi Jui fight with the devil experts and see what abilities this youth from the celestial heavens had and make him incur the hatred of the devils as well. However, Fu Riluo descended and prevented the strong practitioners of the devil race from challenging them. Lu Li, who had been hiding in Xing and's life and death divine treasure before, had popped out too. She had controlled Xing and to capture Qin Mu, but the man had turned the tables on her, chasing her out of his life and death divine treasure. She and Qi Jui were rivals, both wanting to capture Qin Mu, but Qi Jui managed to wipe out Lu Li's enmity with just a few words. Being the single enemy, Qin Mu now became a mutual goal for them. My plans can't catch up to the changes. I can't possibly have everything under my control. He was getting slightly worried. Rascal has screwed up, Cripple muttered behind him. Sun Sovereign took a glance at Qin Mu and smiled. He suddenly felt at ease. Cult Master Qin's mind seems to be in some disorder. Your plans have been messed up. This kind of worrying state makes you vulnerable to being killed by young Master Qi. Does Cult Master Qin need some time to adjust his state? Yes, Qin Mu immediately said. I indeed need to adjust my mental state. Grandpa Butcher, Sun Sovereign, how about you guys settle your dispute first? The smile on Sun Sovereign's face froze. He hadn't expected the brat to actually agree. Butcher laughed and opened his shirt to reveal his chest. Raising his head to the sky, he shouted, Damned heavens! I have scolded you for so long, and now I can finally make you bleed. Sun Sovereign, please! His knife will rushed into the sky and split a cloud into two halves. Butcher's fighting spirit overflowed into the heavens and landed on Sun Sovereign's body. Sun Sovereign felt the other's eyes piercing him like knives and was left astonished. He rose into the sky and shone brightly with golden light. His body grew taller and taller while the wings behind his back spread open. The next moment, golden feathers began to grow all over his body. With feathers covering his skin more and more, Sun Sovereign changed from a human into a three-legged divine bird that was glowing brilliantly. He became compatible with the sun in midair, as though he was the golden crow within it. The golden crow let out a screech that was incomparably ear-piercing. Heaven Knife, I cut you in half and broke all of your knife skills last time. So what do you think you're even doing here? Do you think I've done nothing at all during my years in disabled elderly village? Butcher pulled out his knife with a loud roar and rose into the sky. Each of his steps seemed to land on clouds. His body trembled and became incomparably tall and sturdy. The knife light in the sky instantly became incomparably bright, even overshadowing the blazing sun as it slashed toward it. Knife opening the bright moon ring. Qin Mu couldn't help becoming excited. The ninth move of pig slaughtering knife skills. Ba Shan's gaze was blank as he looked at the sky. The pig slaughter knife skills that Qin Mu had mentioned were 8 skills of Heaven Knife. However, they only had 8 moves. Butcher had executed a knife skill which Ba Shan had never seen before. Heaven Knife had a 9th move. 9 skills of Heaven Knife. Knife opening the bright moon ring. In the sky, snow-bright sword light gathered, and Butcher's body disappeared. Only incomparably bright knife light could be seen gathering like a bright moon as it collided against the radiant sun on the opposite side. In the sun, countless golden feathers gathered into a sword filled with true fire of the blazing sun. The weapon that rushed forward to attack. Clang! The golden sword true fire rushed into the bright moon, and the bright moon suddenly shone brightly. Like a true moon, it seemed to absorb the sunlight to reflect it back as moonlight. The light of the knife suddenly became several times more intense. The bright moon dispersed and transformed into a world-shaking knife light. Qin Mu was ineffably agitated, and he recited loudly, enlisting in Jade Pass, chasing barbarians in Altai Mountains, playing the tune of the plum blossoms, knife opening the bright moon ring. What he recited was the knife secrets of knife opening the bright moon ring. From midair, blood fell like rain. Butcher's strong body stood between heaven and earth. He bathed himself in the god blood and blazing fire while his heaven knife flowed with light after slicing apart the sun. He laughed loudly and said, the beatings of drum rumbled on the sea. The aura of soldiers poured into the clouds, hoping to behead a heavenly god, chasing them out of Innocence Pass. At that moment, a human youth carrying a demon knife on his back walked out from the devil's main camp and raised his head. His mind couldn't help trembling, and he involuntarily fell into a comprehension. Sun Sovereign's head fell, crashing in front of the devil's main camp with a loud explosion. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 592 Dangerous Air. Superb Knife Skills. Fu Riluo looked at Butcher, who was shining with brilliant light, and he couldn't resist praising, truly superb knife skills. Even a place like founding Emperor Celestial Heavens derives glory from an illustrious hero. But even in an era in which paths, skills, and divine arts have flaws, there are still such outstanding people. It is truly a good place. Upon seeing Butcher's knife skills, he began to long even more for great ruins. In comparison to him, Butcher was very young. Even though he didn't receive the complete cultivation system, his knife skills had already entered the path. It was something that even numerous gods and devils in Supreme Emperor Heaven hadn't managed to do. Fu Riluo could see that if Butcher patched all his shortcomings, he'd have hope to become a true god. To have such attainments at such a young age, it had to be the effect of founding Emperor Celestial Heavens. He didn't teach me this move? When Chancellor Ba Shan opened his mouth wide, his voice rumbled like lightning. He turned to look at Qin Mu. Did teacher teach it to you? He did. However, my realm isn't high enough so I can't execute it, Qin Mu said honestly. Chancellor Ba Shan grew furious. Old man is biased. This move is too powerful. Too powerful. It wasn't really because Butcher was biased. When Butcher had crawled to disabled elderly village with only half of his body, he was crazy most of the time and kept scolding the damned heavens, wanting to split them apart. When he was sober, he was a man of few words and just kept quiet. During that time, he was very bitter, but it wasn't only because he had just his upper body left. He was disappointed that he couldn't fight his way up to the heavens and take revenge for his good friends, cleaning the regret off his knife. To deal with Sun Sovereign and the rest of the gods in the sky, he toiled like a crazy man, thinking of countless knife skills. Yet none of them could break the divine arts in the sky. The reason why he was crazy was because he thought too much. But ever since Granny C picked up Qin Mu from the riverside, Butcher's crazy heart slowly opened up due to the little baby. Because of it, he found someone who he could rely on in his heart. From that moment onwards, Butcher spent less and less time being crazy. He had thought too much previously, which had made him crazy, but after Qin Mu's arrival, his heart was at peace. He comprehended everything that had once eluded him. When his knife skills entered the path, he created the 9th form of Heaven Knife, knife opening the bright moon ring. This move was his work of entering the path and becoming an unrivaled great master of the knife path. Chancellor Ba Shan had learned 8 skills of Heaven Knife a long time ago. Butcher found him annoying, so he always took a long detour every time he saw him, so only not long ago had he been caught. Because of that, he hadn't had the time to teach him this move. Besides, knife opening the bright moon ring required not only extremely high cultivation, but also extremely great attainments in knife skills. Chancellor Ba Shan walked the path of battle spells, so he could never enter the path with knife skills. Thus, even if Butcher taught him, he might not be able to master it. Sun Sovereign's blood scattered on the ground and transformed 100 miles area into a sea of fire. His blood was the blood of the golden crow, and inside it was the sun essence that transformed into flames once it touched the ground. And they didn't die out for a long time. Suddenly, a huge sun crashed into the land. The ground trembled, and the place where the sun had crashed also turned into a sea of fire. Qi Jiui frowned, but his brows soon smoothed out. Sun Sovereign has died, but this wasn't a bad thing to him. The man was just a helper he had invited to join him in the lower bound. After all, Sun Sovereign had always stayed there and was familiar with the geography. But Qi Jiui's main motive for bringing Sun Sovereign along was to use him to find Qin Mu. Since it was already done, Sun Sovereign's life and death were of no concern to him. Butcher walked over with his long knife. Sun Sovereign's blood had spilled on him and ignited his body, but since he was a vermilion bird spirit body, this kind of injury was nothing. Awesome! A huge opening split apart on Butcher's chest, and one could faintly see the ribs and the beating heart underneath. It was obvious that he didn't have it easy in his clash with Sun Sovereign earlier. His injury was not light, but he could still smile. Several hundred years of craziness finally split with one knife. How King awesome. Apothecary immediately went up and looked at his wound. He frowned. Butcher, you were almost killed. What's there to be so happy about? Your wound has the remnant of Sun Sovereign's divine art. I can't help you get rid of that, so you will have to do it yourself. Be careful, don't burst your heart from squeezing it. You aren't Xing and who can just change his heart. You might have felt awesome when killing him, but you have almost lost your life as well. You shouldn't be so reckless. Knife skills don't have as many transformations as sword skills, so true knife skills start and end with first fatal strike. If you can receive it, you live. If you can't, you die. It's that simple. Butcher returned his knife into its sheath and gave a shout. Countless tiny knives flashed in front of the wound on his chest and erased the divine art that Sun Sovereign had left behind. He said solemnly, "In the past, my knife skills were particular about being exquisite, complicated, and ever-changing. However, after they entered the path, I changed them from complicated to simple. In the past, midnight battle across Stormy City and sun on East Sea thousand-layer waves were too troublesome. Now, long knife hangs below the moonlight and knife opening the bright moon ring are much simpler." Fu Riluo looked left and right while saying to numerous devil divine arts practitioners, "Remember his words, for they are very logical. Spells, divine arts, battle techniques, you must simplify them in the future." However, he didn't go down to the roots. His simple is derived from complicated, so the journey to having complicated is a must. If you don't experience it, you can never comprehend simple. The so-called simple is gathering your strength and your whole path into one line. Numerous devil divine arts practitioners seem to understand and yet not understand, but they all nodded in agreement. Qin Mu heard what Fu Riluo said, and he couldn't help praising him as well. Fu Riluo's horizons are truly great, and he is a remarkable great master. He is no doubt a true devil, a respectable king. When I created the first form of Calamity Sword, I had also entered simple from complicated. The so-called simple isn't simple at all. The sword skill may look simple, but it actually mobilizes all the strength and brings along the charm of the path. Thus the power is extraordinary. Normal divine arts could mobilize from 10 to 20% of one's strength. The reason they looked strong was because their bodies were extremely powerful. For example, one's right hand and one's left hand may have 100 pounds of strength each. One's legs would have 100 pounds of strength each too. But one couldn't unleash 400 pounds of strength when they punched. And the strength of a divine arts practitioner's body was even more complicated. There was strength from the chi and blood, one that stemmed from the tendons, the primordial spirit, divine treasures, and also the different kinds of rune markings. Only by unleashing all these strengths could one use divine arts. Great divine arts which were able to mobilize from 50 to 60% were rare and remarkable. Only by creating divine arts could people suit themselves better and unleash even more strength. When they comprehended a divine art that had entered the path, the amount of strength they could unleash would become extremely terrifying. Basically, the strength in the entire body would be tapped into. Complicated was the process of discovering all kinds of strengths in one's body, so it couldn't be taken out. Fu Riluo's understanding isn't bad, Qi Jui praised. Qin Mu took a look at him and praised, "Brother Qi's knowledge isn't bad as well." Qi Jui gave a slight smile. Apothecary examined Butcher's wound and used silver needles to pull out the fire poison. He said with a smile, "There's no need to trouble me with this kind of small wound. Muir, get your fatty here to give a lick. He just needs to improve the blood circulation and make the muscles grow." The fatty dragon hurriedly ran over with small steps and smiled apologetically. "Grandpa Butcher, little dragon is going to start licking." Butcher hurriedly looked at Qin Mu. "Muir, do you have any in bottles? Fresh dragon saliva is the best. The one in bottles isn't fresh, and the wound will heal much slower," Apothecary said firmly. Butcher was skeptical. "Brother Qin, Sun Sovereign has already settled his dispute, and Heaven Knife's injury isn't much of a problem, so your mind should have calmed down by now, right?" Qi Jui looked at Qin Mu while speaking with a smile. "It should our turn." Qin Mu was about to say something when a knife light shone. It split from 1 into 2, then into 4, into 8, and continued even more. Zhahuali! Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly, and the knife lights that filled the sky suddenly gathered back, transforming into a knife light that came slashing down. Where the knife fell, the air split in two. Fu Riluo swept his sleeves and pushed back everyone that the knife light was going to cut. The knife light came from 10 miles away, and it came straight for Qi Jui. The youth's pupils contracted, but he relaxed and let the knife light come at him. It suddenly shook and split apart, transforming into over a dozen of knife lights that slashed toward Qi Jui like a peacock opening its tail. Yet they gathered back together once more just next to the tip of Qi Jui's nose. The knife light disappeared. For 10 miles away, Shahuali sheathed the demon knife behind his back. Even though his complexion wasn't good, he was full of spirit and walked with long strides. It was obvious that he had suffered quite a bit of hardship these days just to break through. Butcher looked at Shahuali and suddenly sighed. He said with a bleak expression, "My two disciples, one took the path of battle spells and the other comprehended the sword path. Neither of them actually mastered the essence of knife skills. Yet this person who only saw my knife skill once went and comprehended it." Chancellor Ba Shan blushed while Qin Mu spoke without any shame in a cool and collected voice. "My sword skills have entered the path. I'm much more promising than senior brother Ba Shan, and village chief is very happy." Fu Riluo looked at Shahuali and exclaimed, "Shahuali, you can finish your apprenticeship now." Shahuali bowed and gave his thanks. He then straightened his back, and his sharp gaze fell on Qin Mu before shifting to Qi Jui's face. The knife light in his eyes jumped. "Qin Mu is mine. If you want to kill him before me, I'll kill you first." Cripple was astonished. "Muer, you're pretty popular." Qin Mu's face instantly turned black. "Shahuali, you are under the apprenticeship of High General Luo Wushuang of the Spirit Elite Guards? I can see traces of Luo Wushuang in your knife skill. He is in charge of teaching the younger generation of Spirit Elite Guards in the Celestial Heavens. It's good for you to have attained his true teachings, but do you know who am I?" Qi Jui asked indifferently. Shahuali shook his head. "I won't bother asking who you are. If you want to kill him, you will die first." Qi Jui shook his head as well. "Luo Wushuang's disciple. Isn't your opinion of your own abilities a little too exaggerated? You comprehended just one move so you could walk out of Luo Wushuang's shadow, and you think you can be a match for me? Brother Qin, do you still want to see me fight a devil expert? Let me give you a chance." Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. He felt an extremely dangerous air coming from the youth near him. He felt like there was a prehistoric beast gradually awakening in Qi Jui's body. This kind of feeling was similar when a true dragon executed Ancestral Dragon Supreme Mystery Technique, but Qi Jui was definitely not a dragon. He was most likely a phoenix. This is bad. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently. Qi Jui cultivates a technique that can go up to Emperor's throne. Unbeknownst to him, Cripple appeared behind him and instructed earnestly, "Muer, you should become a coward when it's time to be a coward and flee when it's time to flee. Believe in Grandpa Cripple's teaching." "I'm definitely right." Qin Mu suddenly became excited and fisted his hands tightly. His voice also grew slightly hoarse. "Grandpa Cripple, I haven't beaten someone who has cultivated Emperor's throne technique before." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 593. 9 Phoenixes Perching on Ancient Parasol Tree. Cripple was furious and shouted, "Muer, Grandpa Cripple's good traditions have all been forgotten by you. You only know how to be brave and fierce like Butcher, and you will get cut in half sooner or later too. Butcher, what's this expression of yours? Put your knife down. We talk amiably here. I'm only thinking what's best for Muer." He carefully pushed the knife away from his neck. Qin Mu smiled at him. "Grandpa Cripple, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. The so-called Emperor's throne technique he uses was created by his predecessors and not by him, so it's still up to his comprehension and cultivation to how much power he can unleash. This will make the technique drop by a realm to Numinous Sky technique. Besides, Eternal Peace is undergoing a reform while the Celestial Heavens definitely hasn't done so, which means that Qi Jui's Emperor's throne technique will be another level lower, going down to Jade Capital technique. With just a few words, he lowered an Emperor's throne technique by 2 levels. Even if it's a Jade Capital technique, it's still a few levels higher. True God, Jade Lake, God Execution Stage, and only then Jade Capital, Cripple said coldly. Qin Mu was brimming with confidence. "Because my True God technique is self-created, I can unleash all of its power, which raised it by a level, making it equivalent to a Jade Lake technique. In addition, I'm the Overlord body, so I'm basically on par with God Execution Stage technique, which makes the difference not that large." Cripple was speechless from anger. "Cripple, this is the reason why you still can't cross the Divine Bridge and enter the Celestial Palaces. You are too timid, afraid of this and that, afraid that you can't cross the Divine Bridge. Actually, your cultivation is enough to do it. Luckily, Moore didn't learn from you or else he would never succeed in anything, Granny C said. Cripple couldn't be angry at her and just said angrily, "Dote on him more. I don't care anymore. I'll see him get beaten to death sooner or later." Even though he said so, he was still extremely concerned about Qin Mu. Back when Granny C had picked him from the river, he was the first in the village to accept Qin Mu. Granny C was annoyed at him wetting the bed and sent him away, but Cripple had brought him back time and time again without any complaint. After Qin Mu grew slightly older, he didn't have a playmate, so it was always this old boy that played together with him. Of course, he tended to bully Qin Mu, stealing the candy Granny C had bought for him or seizing toys old Ma had made for him. It was always him who made Qin Mu cry and then was beaten by Granny C until she was satisfied. During those years, village chief had been dispirited. Blind's Dao heart was broken by Xing'an. Granny C was worrying about Li Tianxing, who was in her Dao heart. Mute only forged silently without talking to anyone. Apothecary had a buttload of love debts. Deaf didn't bother about anyone. Old Ma was reminded of his departed wife and children when he saw Qin Mu, while Butcher was frequently crazy because he knew the truth about the sky. Back then, they all had yet to undo the knots in their hearts. Cripple was the only one who had simply been forced into the village by Imperial Preceptor. He had a light burden, and so he was able to treat Qin Mu wholeheartedly. When Fu Riluo saw the group squabbling, he was bewildered. The relationships between gods were usually one of politeness and courtesy. Even if they were enemies, both sides would usually treat one another with respect. It was rare to see gods quarreling every day like the gods of disabled elderly village. Shahuali, you need to be careful when fighting with young Master Qi. Fu Riluo didn't stop Shahuali from fighting altogether. Now that you have finished your apprenticeship, there's nothing more I can teach you. It's the same for your other teacher, Luo Wushuang. From today onwards, you need to comprehend with your own cultivation. Fighting with young Master Qi is your wish, and so I won't stop you, just go. As the respectable king of the devil race, he had an abnormal bearing. Even if he was the enemy, his way of doing things was still very admirable. Shahuali gave his thanks and looked at Qijui. There seemed to be a knife light flashing in his eyes. His knife skill had just taken shape, and he desperately needed someone to confirm his abilities. Fu Riluo, this disciple of yours won't be a match for young Master Qi, Luli said in a low voice. You have no idea how terrifying his inheritance is. His master is an ancient big shot of the celestial heavens, a prehistoric existence. Great ruins was created by that existence. Fu Riluo's left face's voice was indifferent. So what? From the ancient times until now, paths, skills, and divine arts have all changed so much that prehistoric things might no longer be powerful. You're making the celestial heavens too much of a legend. Even if Shahuali isn't a devil, he has still inherited our spirit. He becomes stronger when facing the strong, and he fights fiercer and fiercer. He also has extremely high comprehension and was able to comprehend the Tao when Heaven Knife slew Sun Sovereign with one knife. Who else could have done a similar thing? Shahuali might not lose this battle. Luli snorted and didn't say anything else. Shinaji. The knife light shone, and Shahuali made his move. He used Luo Wushuang's knife skills, and the knife light started to split. The demon knife in his hands instantly became excited, and the demon eye opened to lock its gaze on Qi Jui. When the knife light split, it multiplied again and again. Qi Jui stood motionless. Suddenly, though, flames fluttered behind him as if he was a phoenix flapping its wings. The wings went before him, sending feathers forward. They were gorgeous and didn't break even when they collided with the knife light. In an instant, Shahuali's fish and knife skills separated in 10,000 knife lights, yet when they collided with the feathers of the phoenix, they could not break through the feathers. On the contrary, the flaming feathers broke through the knife lights and rushed at Shahuali. His body suddenly vanished before reappearing the next instant. Every step he took, his body would pause for a moment, and the demon knife in his hand would slash down. All kinds of basic knife forms were executed, and they burst forth like a huge sun, a devil god splitting a mountain, or flowers and leaves of a lotus pond. All kinds of apparitions poured out, filling the sky with knife lights slashing at Qi Jui. His speed was extremely fast, and the speed of his young true god's corporeal body was such that he left a series of afterimages. This speed was no inferior to that of Qin Mu. Such fast speed and strong corporeal body allowed him to leave afterimages in an area of 100 fields around Qi Jui. They surrounded him and attack as one. Not only that, even the sky was filled with Zhehuali's figures. They were horizontal, lying flat, standing diagonally, and even upside down. They attacked from all kinds of strange angles. Qi Jui still stood unmoving, yet he seemed to be able to see the sky and the earth. All around him, his phoenix feathers bloomed continuously, and more of them appeared. They gradually filled the area of several yards, preventing the demon knife of Zhehuali from getting close. Some of them even chased after Zhehuali. Even if his speed was fast and his battle power was strong, Qin Mu and the rest could see that the phoenix feathers were a great threat to him. Zhehuali's speed was like a clap of rolling thunder, yet each one seemed to be measured, and the distance they covered was exactly the same. If the places where his feet touched the ground were connected together, the first 2 steps set the boundaries of a circle, next 3 made a triangle, the 4 after a square, then 5 a pentagon, and so on and so forth. The more footsteps there were, the closer they came to a perfect circle. All of the shapes used Qi Jui as the center, and Zhehuali swirled around him as he walked. Furthermore, he wasn't walking on a flat surface, but a 3-dimensional space that was sometimes far and sometimes close, sometimes above and sometimes below, sometimes to the left and sometimes to the right. If all the lines were connected, the sight would definitely be extremely dazzling. It was also because of this that his body movements and knife skills were unpredictable. His movements had to have been inherited from divine knife Luo Wushuang. That man's footsteps, as well as his knife, were extremely strict. Yet Zhehuali slowly left further and further away from his opponent. Qi Jui still stood in the same spot without moving. The space taken up by the phoenix feathers grew, forcing Zhehuali to continuously fall back. The feathers were his divine arts, not his spirit weapon. With just his divine art, he made Zhehuali unable to get close. Not only that, the phoenix feathers gradually formed a kind of apparition. It was a tree, an ancient parasol tree that was overflowing with light. It stood tall behind the youth, its crown covering the sky. The light flowed down in various colors, and Qi Jui was like a god under the tree bathed under a colored light. The people observing the battle couldn't help the grim expressions that surfaced on their faces. It was especially evident on Granny C. Her spells were the strongest in disabled elderly village, and she had great comprehension of divine arts. After experiencing the baptism of the heart devil, she was on the verge of entering the path with spell divine arts, which meant that her future was bright. Her divine arts could be ranked first in disabled elderly village and in the whole Eternal Peace Empire. Yet Qi Jui's divine art made her see an even more beautiful and profound level of attainment in divine arts. The ancient parasol tree wasn't the divine art that Qi Jui had comprehended, but a divine art of his technique. Qi Jui had only used what he learned, yet the power of the divine art surpassed all those on the same realm. Just based on the exquisiteness of the divine art, Granny C admitted that she was inferior. The ancient parasol tree was condensed from countless feather divine arts. The construction was so exquisite that it was something she had never seen before, and Qi Jui's power was finally ready. Mu'er, listen to your grandpa cripple and admit defeat, Granny C said to Qin Mu. He is yet to use his spirit weapon, and he is already able to do this much. His cultivation is terrifyingly dense. His spell divine art can already be called a Dao spell. You won't be looked down upon if you admit defeat. Qin Mu fisted his hands tightly while staring nervously at the battlefield. He was oblivious to her words. The ancient parasol tree was being nourished more and continued to spread out, becoming even more perfect. There was even a phoenix's nest on among its branches, constructed from feathers. At this moment, Zhehuali was already 50 yards away from Qi Jui. Even though his attacks were fierce, they no longer posed any threat to Qi Jui. Once the phoenix's nest was constructed, a phoenix gradually took shape within it. Indescribable pulses went out as the phoenix grew more and more perfect. It was a 9-headed phoenix with 9 slender and elegant necks that were either raised up or hung down from the nest as it examined the surroundings. Qin Mu had felt the aura of a prehistoric beast from Qijui's body, and this was most likely the reason. The pulse became stronger and stronger, and the 9-headed phoenix also became more and more beautiful, more and more real. The 9-headed phoenix and ancient parasol tree didn't pressure only Zhehuali. It was extremely terrifying to everyone watching the surroundings. Brother Qin, didn't you want to take a look at my divine arts? Under the ancient parasol tree, Qijui's expression was incomparably sacred. Zhehuali finally exploded under the huge pressure, and he slashed down with his knife. It was the first knife move he had created after he had entered the path. A huge demon eye appeared behind his back and opened up. A beam of light shot on the knife with which he had slashed, and its power instantly increased drastically. It had the power of Qin Mu's opening calamity sword that could conquer every obstacle. Superb knife skills. He has the ability to fight me. The thumb and index finger of Qijui's right hand pinched together, and the madra, which was like a phoenix head, smashed toward the knife light that had broken through the crown of the ancient parasol tree. A clear phoenix's cry rang out, and the 9-headed phoenix flapped its wings. However, it didn't fly towards Zhehuali, but rushed toward Qin Mu like flowing light. Zhehuali's demon knife welcomed the madra of Qijui. Once it was out, the ancient parasol tree fell onto the demon knife. Qijui actually unleashed his strongest attack at Zhehuali and Qin Mu at the same time. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 594. Why is it like this? What a strong divine art. Qin Mu couldn't help becoming excited. Before the 9-headed phoenix even arrived, the gale raised by the power of the great divine arts had already undone the ribbon tying his hair. It fluttered backward while his hair went horizontal. The skin on his face was blown into creases, and an incomparably scorching heat made it hard for him to breathe. Zhehuali and Qin Mu were on par with each other. Qijui's attack on both of them at the same time showed just how confident he was. He had the confidence to take down both Zhehuali and Qin Mu, these two young experts. As the disciple of an ancient existence in the celestial heavens, he was outstanding in that high-up place. Upon coming down to the lower bound to settle matters, he looked refined and elegant, dealing with matters courteously and keeping to etiquette no matter if he was faced with a friend or a foe. However, deep within, he still looked down on the strong practitioners of the lower bound, thinking that they were all country bumpkins. His divine art had already been brewing for a long time. As he and Zhehuali tested each other, he slowly completed the great divine art, 9 phoenixes perching on ancient parasol tree. It was a great divine art of an emperor's throne technique, and once it was complete, he could crush all enemies on the same realm. It was definitely unrivaled. He wanted to take down Qin Mu and Zhehuali to show the awe of the celestial heavens and make the country bumpkins of the lower bound understand the heavens' might. Qin Mu's blood boiled. Qijui was attacking 2 people at once, but he felt as if he was facing Qijui's attack by himself. It was evident that the youth from the celestial heavens was a terrifying opponent like none he'd seen before. Even though Qijui's great divine art needed a long time to take shape, its power excited Qin Mu. He had never seen such a terrifying opponent before. He couldn't help letting out a loud shout, and dragon roars reverberated through his body. In that instant, they rang out 8 times as 8 voices of ancestral dragons sounded out. Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique circulated 1 cycle. The 9-headed phoenix flew over with multicolored lights which were dazzling and eye-catching. It was also giving off an astonishing power. The 9-headed phoenix reached Qin Mu's body in an instant. It had looked incomparably huge on the tree, but when it flew to Qin Mu's face, it was no bigger than a foot. But even though it had become smaller, the power had only become stronger, and the threat posed by it was even greater. Qijui used a madra, and the ancient parasol tree fell onto the demon knife. When the two came close to colliding, pulses spread out in all directions, followed by gales filled with flames and knife lights. The gales whooshed and swept out in all directions. The ground was instantly melted and became lava upon which knife lights jumped around. The moment the 2 great divine arts collided, demon knives leaped out from the lava, and the knife skill each of them executed was different. The handles of the demon knives all had a demon eyes which were extremely strange. They locked their gazes on Qi, and the path which each demon knife took seemed to be controlled by them. Small, ancient parasol trees appeared in the lava to block the demon knives. There were phoenix nests on the trees, and as they gave off multicolored light, the demon knives that had flown out from the lava were shattered. At the same time, Qin Mu's sword pellet flew up and floated in front of the heart of his brows. When his sword fingers tapped that place, the tiny sword pellet formed from 8,000 swords instantly changed its shape. 8,000 swords turned into a sword light. It became incomparably intense the moment he pointed with his sword fingers. Once he gathered all his strength and energy, he stabbed with them in the direction of the nine-headed phoenix. Swoosh! The sword light collided with the phoenix. The instant the sword light burst forth, it was thick as a pillar, but after it rushed out from his sword fingers, it became incomparably fine. It was like a cold ray. Yet upon closer inspection, it seemed to contain countless sights. The first form of his calamity sword was called Opening Calamity Sword, and Carefree Sword was the core of it. Carefree Sword had a total of 8 sides to its blade, and what they reflected were the runes of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that shone in all directions. The sword light reflected the runes on the child sword, activating its power which was then reflected on the rest. The blade of every sword was like an 8-sided mirror, and in just an instant, all 8,000 swords lit up, executing all of their power. The 8,000 swords were continuously moving, and the path of each sword was different. In time, all of the power of the 8,000 swords gathered together in Carefree Sword. This was the marvel of Opening Calamity Sword. Based solely on appearance, Qin Mu had merely tapped the heart of his brows and gave a stab which looked extremely simple. However, something this simple included the cultivation and comprehension of his whole life as well as the strength of his corporeal body, primordial spirit, paths, skills, and divine arts, and even his physical power. When Butcher and Fu Riluo talked about entering simple from complicated, the reason why Qin Mu had thought high of it was because he had already taken that step. In comparison to Qi Jui's great divine art, which had to take some time to activate and prepare, his great divine art Calamity Sword was abnormally fast. This was the difference between creating and learning. Qin Mu had stepped into technique entering the path and created his own Calamity Sword, so his reaction speed was incomparably quick. Zhehuali walked the path of knife skills entering the path. His knife skill was created by himself, but his technique was from others. He had learned Luo Wushuang's technique as well as that of Fu Riluo, so he was slightly slower than Qin Mu in entering the path with knife skills. Yet even though it was slightly slower, it was still much faster than the time required for Qi Jui to unleash his great divine arts. However, Qi Jui cultivated an emperor's throne technique of the celestial heavens, and the power of his divine art was incomparably powerful. It was rarely seen in the worlds, and its power alone surpassed the techniques of true God by leaps. However, the great divine art was split into 2. The nine-headed phoenix was aimed at Qin Mu while the ancient parasol tree was thrown at Zhehuali. This had also split its power into 2. Qin Mu's sword light pierced through the heads of the nine-headed phoenix. Even though it looked small, it was formed from countless divine arts. Upon contact, they instantly burst forth. The power of the 8,000 swords hidden in Qin Mu's sword also burst forth. 8,000 incomparably fine swords that were hard for the naked eye to see jumped out and executed different sword moves, slicing apart the divine arts in the nine-headed phoenix's body. In a swift clash, the nine-headed phoenix was obliterated, and the fine sword lights rushed toward Qi Jui. When Qi Jui's divine art was broken, he gave a grunt. Suddenly, flames erupted behind him, and he twisted his neck so another 8 long necks could have space to grow. They were covered in fine phoenix feathers which were all of 7 colors. The phoenix heads that followed rose with plumes at the top. Qi Jui looked like the emperor of the birds, and each phoenix head pecked down toward Qin Mu's sword light. The moment he diverted his attention to deal with Qin Mu, the pressure on Zhehuali was weakened, and countless demon knives leaped out from the lava. They combined into one and slashed down on Qi Jui. Behind the youth, His gorgeous wings that were like knives opened up. His feathers were like swords when they rose to face the incoming demon knife. Qin Mu quickly followed after the sword light. His feet moved quickly, exploding with a loud rumble. He went forward with a punch, which sucked in all the air surrounding Qi Jui. All of it was compressed into his fist. From around his fist, bolts of lightning burst forth in all directions. Qi Jui raised his hand to receive the attack, but on the other side, Shahuali rushed over with long strides like a furious devil god. Devil language rang out from his mouth as his qi and blood turned violent when he struck out with a madra. Qi Jui's other hand clenched into a madra, and he prepared to fight against the two of them. They came with incomparably terrifying strength, and two loud rumbles rang out. The youth gave a grunt, and his 9 heads coughed up blood at the same time. Qin Mu's other hand opened up, and the flying swords that had been sent away by the 8 phoenix heads transformed back into a sword pellet that fell into his hand. His grip grew forceful, and a snow-bright sword pillar formed by 8,000 swords swirling furiously swept towards Qi Jui's neck, ready to cut off his 9 heads. The swirling sword light sliced through the air. If Qi Jui came anywhere close to it, he would shatter into pieces and get minced into the finest chunks of meat. Shahuali grabbed his knife, and with a clank, it welcomed Qin Mu's sword. Knife lights burst forth and dispersed Qin Mu's sword light. The young man sneered and said, "He's mine. It's best if Cult Master Qin does not interfere." Their bodies trembled violently, and their arms turned numb. The demon knife and the sword pellet were jolted out from their hands from the vibrations. Qin Mu stretched his other hand out to grab the demon knife, and his footsteps crisscrossed as he slashed down. With a sneer, he said, "Shahuali, you are brainless. This person is our enemy, so we need to kill him before we can be at ease." His knife was imposing and majestic. He had inherited Butcher's wild and overbearing spirit in his knife skills, so his power was actually not much inferior to that of Shahuali with the knife. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his hand. When he looked down, he saw that the demon eye at the handle of the knife had actually grown a mouth. It was full of razor-sharp teeth, and they bit down on his palm, drawing blood. While he was busy with that, Shahuali grabbed the sword pellet. He was slightly stunned upon catching hold of it, and the sword pellet nearly fell from his hand as he had never expected for it to be so heavy. He nearly lost his grip on it, but he quickly adjusted, and the sword pellet actually burst forth with sword light. He didn't have much attainments with sword skills, and there were 8,000 swords in the sword pellet, making it hard and tiring to control, but he still raised the sword light to defend against the demon knife that Qin Mu had just used. Without an expression, he said, "He and you are the same. Both of you will be killed by me. Your fate is to fall under my knife." The instant the sword and the knife collided, Shahuali gave a grunt and stumbled back. Qin Mu was proficient in knife skills, so even though he got bit by the demon knife, the power of his move was still great. On top of that, his magic power was more vigorous than Shahuali's, which made it hard for the other to defend. The knife and sword broke free from their grips, and the demon knife trembled in midair. Countless knife lights surrounded the 3 people and danced in the sky, colliding with one another. Qin Mu immediately used his own magic power to control the sword pellet. Sword light rushed out and transformed into a mountain and river painting to press down on them, drowning out the 3 people. Sword treading mountains and rivers. How impudent! To dare to disregard me! Qi Jui was both astonished and furious. His body shook again, and he revealed his 9 heads on the human body which had bird claws and wings. He was about to explode with power and kill the 2 pests when Qin Mu and Shahuali suddenly worked together to severely injure him. Qi Jui coughed blood. Qin Mu and Shahuali attacked each other ruthlessly while surrounding him. Whenever he had the slightest idea to fight back, they would join hands to heavily injure him. Every time Qin Mu attacked him, Shahuali would defend him, and whenever Shahuali attacked him, he would be blocked by Qin Mu, who was throwing a tantrum. Covered in blood, Qi Jui finally felt fear and loss spread through him. If faced with Qin Mu or Shahuali alone, he would win 10 times out of 10. But when facing the 2 of them, he could only receive a beating. Why is it like this? He was very puzzled. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 595, The Harmless Smile. If Qi Jui hadn't acted generous and attacked Qin Mu and Zhehuali at the same time, he would have smoothly defeated Zhehuali and not landed in such a state. Qin Mu and Zhehuali knew that his great divine art was astonishing, so when he attacked them, they had first heavily injured him. Qi Jui then became their side dish while they were the only ones fighting for real. The 8,000 flying swords and countless knives were like pattering rain as they collided again and again. Qi Jui was located in the center of the battlefield, so he was always surrounded by Qin Mu's sword lights and Zhehuali's knife lights. The moment he got ready to burst forth, he suffered attacks from the two people at the same time. This kind of situation was something he had never expected. Qin Mu and Zhehuali's footsteps were quick, and they sometimes drew close and sometimes went away. The two of them mainly fought with their swords and knives while only occasionally assisting themselves with spells or clashing with their corporeal bodies. Zhehuali gradually fell into a disadvantage, and Qi Jui saw an opportunity. When Qin Mu attacked Zhehuali, he also did the same, trying to ally himself with Qin Mu to get rid of Zhehuali. But at the same moment, he felt a chill coming near his heart and lowered his head. A sword tip was sticking out from the front of his chest. Zhehuali was blown away by Qin Mu and tumbled back. He flew over 10 miles before stopping with heavy injuries. Qi Jui's 9 heads all turned around and saw Qin Mu standing in the air with a harmless smile. Qin Mu smacked forward with his hand, his fingers splayed out. It was Yin Yang Heaven Flipping Hands that he had learned from 3rd Ancestor Human Emperor, and he used it together with 5th Ancestor Human Emperor's 5 Thunder Heaven Raising Bell. Over 10 miles away, Zhehuali just managed to stabilize his body when the power from Qin Mu's palm went after him. Zhehuali flew up like a tattered rucksack. He got frozen into an ice sculpture by the pure Yin palm force, and 5 Thunder Bell appeared near him. If it rang, it could shatter him into pieces since he was an ice sculpture. In the meantime, Qin Mu grabbed the sharp sword of his sword pellet with his other hand and sent his magic power into all 8,000 swords. Fine flying swords were dancing around with various sword moves in Qi Jui's body, and even rushing into his divine treasures. The second move of sword picture, sort of founding Emperor Sea of Blood. Around Qin Mu's body, crimson spread out and drowned him out like a sea of blood. The smile on the youth's face was reflected in it, and it seemed to become strange and evil, making people shudder without feeling cold. I've never lost a group scuffle before. Qi Jui's hair stood up on ends upon hearing his voice. The power of sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood exploded, and 5 Thunder Heaven Raising Bell covered Zhehuali. The bell then rang. The 2 young experts were about to die under his hands. At that moment, the bell disintegrated from Fu Riluo's majestic magic power that came from a single palm move. On the other side, Lu Li tapped on the sword tip in Qi Jui's chest. Flying swords flew backward one by one, leaving Qi Jui's body. Butcher pulled out his knife, Blind took hold of his spear, and flames rushed into the sky behind Mute. They each took a step forward while Cripple grabbed Qin Mu to fall back. In a blink, he appeared behind Butcher and the rest. Fu Riluo and Lu Li had saved Zhehuali and Qi Jui, but they didn't make any moves after that. Little friend Qi, you've stayed in the celestial heavens and don't know about the craftiness of the people in the lower bound. Now you have suffered, right? Lu Li said with a smile. Qi Jui was silent for a moment. Jui is willing to ally himself with provincial governor. Fu Riluo's heart moved slightly, and he dissipated the qi of pure Yin that plagued Zhehuali's body, releasing him from the frozen state. Zhehuali was still in shock when he suddenly saw the ground folding up. In the next instant, he was back beside Fu Riluo, who had been over 10 miles away. It was obvious that Fu Riluo had folded up space. Butcher and the rest were astonished. Fu Riluo's abilities were much greater than what they had imagined. These kinds of abilities meant that he was no mere true devil. Fu Riluo's left face looked at Zhehuali, and he said calmly, "Victory and defeat are common in war. The true victory and defeat is life and death. So as long as you don't die, you haven't lost completely. Do you understand?" Zhehuali sheathed the demon knife on his back. He bowed and said, "Disciple understands." Fu Riluo was happy. Your Dao heart is trained well, so your success will definitely surpass that of Luo Wushuang in the future. Behind Butcher and the rest, Cripple was overjoyed and patted Qin Mu heavily on the shoulder. Mooer, you didn't throw Grandpa Cripple's face. That move earlier was truly sinister, hiding a blade in your smile while you injured him with a hidden arrow. As expected of one that's been taught by me. When I saw your smile just then, even I couldn't help shivering. Qin Mu hurriedly said humbly, "It's all because of Grandpa Cripple's good teaching. If it wasn't for Grandpa Cripple, I wouldn't have defeated them. In regards to hiding a blade in my smile, I can at most rank number 2. Grandpa Cripple is still the best in the world." Cripple stroked his mountain goat beard and laughed loudly. He was pretty pleased with himself. Def sneered and said, "The men of today have sadly degenerated." Luli paid no attention to Butcher and the rest that had nervous expressions. She looked at the divine city that Def had drawn and suddenly said with a smile, "Fu Riluo, have you seen through the real and the fake?" Fu Riluo turned his head and his 3 faces looked at the god city. After a moment, he said, "I can't see through it. May you enlighten me?" "Look at the souls of the gods there," Luli said with a smile. Fu Riluo was astonished and sought enlightenment sincerely. "How do I look at the souls?" Butcher, mute, and blind knew that things were going bad and gradually moved back. Def's face changed slightly, and he instantly knew that Luli had seen through their ruse. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His painting could pass off as genuine, which meant that no flaws could be seen in the world in the painting he had created, and even the connection to reality was seamless as well. However, he couldn't create souls. Luli had to be a strong practitioner from Yudu with extremely deep attainments in the spells of the soul to have seen through the marvel of Def's painting. Everyone's palms went sweaty, and they surrounded Qin Mu while they continuously fell back. Their unease grew stronger and stronger. Fu Riluo and Lu Li seemed to pay no attention to them, allowing them to leave. Lu Li turned around and raised her slender jade hand to draw a circle in the air. Light leaked out from it, and it became a huge and bright mirror that floated in the sky. "Respectable king, please look at the scene in the mirror." Fu Riluo did so, and what the mirror reflected was the majestic god city in front of them. It included Butcher, Qin Mu, Granny C, and the rest in front of it. Some of their souls were standing in front of the southern heavenly gate of the celestial palaces. Some of them were on the divine bridge, and there was even the soul of a person standing in life and death realm. Under his feet was the dark Yudu. But what was weird was that the god city in the mirror was only a huge pit. Not only did the god city not exist, but even the gods and the army of 1,000,000 weren't there. However, Butcher and the rest that were retreating toward the god city could be seen. The mirror showed all of their souls. Fu Riluo took a look at himself, and he saw his 3-headed true form standing among the devil's celestial palaces. He was a devil god with 3 heads. The 3 faces were only an illusion created after he had cultivated the 3 heads into one. Fu Riluo looked at Qi Jui, who was reflected in the mirror, and his reflection was that of a 9-headed phoenix that was bathing in blazing golden light and divine fire. He looked sacred and extraordinary. Shahuali, when reflected in the mirror, was a normal human, except for the demon knife behind his back. It was a one-eyed demon beast full of a terrifying demon AI. It was extremely frightening, yet the most terrifying one in the mirror was still Qin Mu. The youth had 3 eyes and was glowing with crimson light. He was incomparably huge, and his 3 eyes looked over, seemingly having detected him peeking. Fu Riluo felt his soul tremble, and his chest started to ache again. Lu Li hurriedly turned the mirror away from Qin Mu at the rest. She said, "Are you clear now?" The mirror was pointed in the direction of the devil camp. A few devil experts behind them looked toward it and saw the souls of the devil gods and devils in the mirror. Fu Riluo's disciple Shu Yi was slightly stunned when he saw a slightly strange soul among the devils. That person was actually standing among the celestial palaces. Furthermore, his soul was tattered and filled with patches that seemed to be stitched together from numerous people's souls. Shu Yi was about to look in detail when Lu Li had pulled back the mirror. Could I have seen wrongly? Shu Yi was bewildered. Fu Riluo shuddered, and his voice was hoarse when he spoke. Those 3 eyes. Sealed by Earth Count, Luli said with a smile. You can forget about coveting him. Your aim is just Supreme Emperor Heaven. Fu Riluo composed himself and said solemnly, I can finally see the true face of the God City. IT was creating flowers from emptiness, creating reality and passing off fake as genuine. With the painting as a world, they connected fake and real, making it hard to distinguish the two. To create gods and all things with the painting path, the person's attainments have to have reached the peak of the painting path. His voice reached the ears of Death, Granny C and the rest. For Dao friends to have been able to trick me and stop my devil army for several days, giving Supreme Emperor Heaven time to take a breather and prepare. Even if all of you die, you can be proud of yourselves. The expressions of everyone in the group changed drastically. They saw the space around them warp. Even though they were moving back, the distance between them and Fu Riluo was decreasing. We're done for. Done for. Cripple's expression was ashen as he muttered softly to himself. The green bull under Chancellor Ba Shan's leg moved angrily and sprinted furiously toward the God City. However, no matter how fast he sprinted, he got farther and farther away while getting closer to Fu Riluo. The green bull hurriedly stopped, not daring to move anymore. Respectable king, I only want Qin Fengqing. Hand him to me, and I'll give you a Supreme Emperor Heaven, Lu Li said with a smile. Don't worry, now that I've seen the fake from the real, they cannot run anymore. Fu Riluo took a step and walked toward everyone. The air instantly warped violently, and everyone involuntarily got closer to him. Butcher shouted angrily and swung the knife to slash toward the sky and the ground, trying to sever the warped space. Yet his knife light was instantly warped and vanished without a trace. Suddenly, though, the sky trembled violently, and Fu Riluo stopped. He raised his head to look at the sky, and his expression filled with astonishment. Lu Li also hurriedly raised her head in astonishment. In the sky, incomparably thick beams of light shone down and connected to the ground. Next, it transformed into turbulent blood light. Huge but broken planets suddenly squeezed out from space and appeared in the sky of Supreme Emperor Heaven. Then a second dilapidated planet appeared, followed by a third. An astonishing sight appeared in the sky. A huge land pressed down on the bunch of planets that had suddenly appeared in the sky above Supreme Emperor Heaven. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 596, Blood Sacrificing Luofu Heaven. The appearance of the vast land in the sky made Fu Riluo trembled, and he forgot to control his divine art. In the devil's main camp, the soldiers of the devil race raised their heads and looked at the vision in the sky with blank expressions. Not only them, almost all of the life forms in the entire Supreme Emperor Heaven, no matter if they were human or devil, slave or god, or even strange beasts and insects living in the mountains and sea. They all raised their heads at this very moment and looked at the huge planets that were pressing down from the sky and also at that magnificent and boundless land. That was a sight so shocking that it couldn't be described with words. It was a magnificent sight that they had never seen before in their lives. The huge planets were so low that it seemed they could be touched with their hands. The mountains on the land were like hanging sharp precipice hanging down. The sea in the land was like a sapphire blue gem. What was even stranger was even though it was hanging above Supreme Emperor Heaven, the water from the sea didn't fall and flow into Supreme Emperor Heaven. Fu Riluo's body trembled and he forgot to seize Butcher, Qin Mu and the rest. Qin Mu looked at it in detail, and those beams of light that were connecting that land with Supreme Emperor were from tall sacrificial altars, and these sacrificial altars were as astonishing as the mountains. Even if one raised their head from Supreme Emperor Heaven, they could faintly see. Qin Mu cried out, "That is Luofu Heaven." His voice broke the astonishment and silence in the surrounding. The hearts of Butcher, Granny C, and the rest trembled, and Cripple hurriedly asked, "Muer, what kind of damned place is Luofu Heaven?" "The world of the devil race, which is also the world of where these devils in Supreme Emperor Heaven resides in." Qin Mu took out teleportation flags and quickly stabbed around them. "I have suffered from Fu Riluo's pupil divine art and got seized by him. In his illusion, I became him and I saw Luofu heaven before. That world is basically almost destroyed. The devil race suddenly pulled their Luofu heaven over. What are they preparing to do? Granny C was rather puzzled and she said with a low voice, "Could they have planned to let all devil enter Supreme Emperor Heaven?" Blind's gaze was deep and he shook his head. "Granny, you can't see the details in Luofu Heaven. This Luofu Heaven isn't moved over by the devil race. There are still 20 and more gods on the sacrificial altars, so it should be done by them. Furthermore, they aren't moving Luofu Heaven to Supreme Emperor Heaven. They are..." His voice was slightly excited. "They are blood-sacrificing Luofu Heaven. Blood-sacrificing Luofu Heaven." Everyone was astonished, and just as they were about to check in detail, Qin Mu had already executed the teleportation flag and the huge flag swirled to send them into that god city. Right in the instant Qin Mu executed the teleportation flag, the devil's main camp was also in chaos as a true devil got attacked by surprise. That was a true dragon that flew out from the youth's waist and attacked when everyone was looking up the sky in a daze. That divine dragon injured that true devil severely. Meanwhile, the movement of the devil youth was strange, and he came to the back of that true devil as though he was floating. His divine art was even stranger, and after a series of attacks, that true devil was chopped in 8 chunks. The main camp was in chaos, and before the devil gods could even react, they saw that devil youth taking out a chest, and the chest automatically opened to swallow the chopped devil god up. That devil youth raised the chest and stepped on the divine dragon to rise into the sky. Behind him, devil gods gave chase furiously. At the same time, light in the god city shook and the teleportation formation appeared. Before people could come back to their senses, Qin Mu executed the teleportation flags again, and the light shone again before the light even extinguished, sending everyone out of the city. He executed the teleportation repeatedly and did it over and over again until they finally escaped 400 to 500 miles away. Qin Mu's magic power was exhausted, and he swept his sleeves to keep the teleportation flag. "I can only teleport to here." Hu Linger said, "I know. It's Fatty Dragon that's too heavy." The dragon Qilin lowered his head in shame. Everyone hurriedly rushed towards Li City, and on the way, they focused their gazes to look at the sky, but they still couldn't see too clearly. Yet in Blind's eyes, he could see the terrains of Luofu Heaven. The lakes and the seas were all crumbling. Mountains crumbled and the sea vaporized. The rivers located in Luofu Heaven were like twisting snakes that were squirming in midair. This sight was truly terrifying. Blood sacrificing the entire world made everyone felt that it was a spectacular yet sorrowful sight. At this moment, they heard a loud cry coming from the sky like the sorrowful cry of a whale in the sea. It was incomparably long-lasting, like the sorrowful cry of a world that was dying. Even though human emotions couldn't be heard from the cry, it still made people couldn't help tearing up. Even though that world was the world of the devil race, but every world was the mother of all lifeforms born there. When they heard the sorrowful cry of their dying mother, they made people couldn't help feeling the same way too. Luofu Heaven isn't being pulled closer. Granny C suddenly came to a realization, and she hurriedly ran to Li City with everyone. She said with a low voice, "Luofu Heaven is still at its original position. It's actually this power of blood sacrifice that had established access between Luofu Heaven and Supreme Emperor Heaven, making Luofu Heaven seem to be above our head." Fu Riluo's heart was cold. He raised his head to look at his Luofu Heaven that had raised him up. Even when Qin Mu had escaped, even when Xing'an had created havoc in the devil's main camp, he didn't bother to even take a look. Luofu Heaven of the devil race transformed into pure energy in the blood sacrifice, and they were currently pouring into Supreme Emperor Heaven. Saint Woodcutter has succeeded. He was abnormally clever, so he naturally knew who had done it. After Saint Woodcutter had taken a bet at Li City, he had vanished for a period of time and didn't reappear until now. He must have been planning to take drastic measures, entering Luofu Heaven, the old nest of the devils, to set up the sacrificial altars needed to sacrifice Luofu Heaven. And now, Saint Woodcutter has already attained the means to sacrifice Luofu Heaven. Lu Li was long used to this sight, as she has already long seen worlds after worlds being destroyed in her eyes. There were countless worlds that got destroyed in Yudu before and formed Earth Count's horns of 9 bends. Countless broken souls were wailing miserably in those worlds in pitch-black darkness. Capturing that brat with the surname Qin is more important. She immediately made a decision and rushed towards the direction where Qin Mu and the rest had teleported to. At this moment, Luofu Heaven, which was sinking into destruction, suddenly stopped, and they suddenly heard a voice coming from the other world. Fu Riluo, do you want to stop the battle or for Luofu Heaven to be obliterated? Luli knew it was bad, and she turned her head to look at Fu Riluo. Fu Riluo's 3 faces were stupefied, and one of the face raised up to look at Luofu Heaven. Fu Riluo's booming voice rang out, "Heavenly Teacher, you and I will make a pact to temporarily stop the battle. We will make peace, and my devil race will split the world into 2 with the gods of your Supreme Emperor Heaven. My devil race will take half of Supreme Emperor Heaven while the other half belongs to you. Since you have the weakness of my devil race by controlling Luofu Heaven, you can also be at ease." All right. The sky was ripped apart and Saint Woodcutter's face appeared in the sky. There was only the face and no ears. This face just suddenly appeared in the sky and looked down at Fu Riluo. His voice rumbled in the sky like heavenly thunder. "Make an oath to Earth Count?" Fu Riluo said sternly. "An oath to Earth Count." Butcher, Blind, and the rest that were rushing towards Li City furiously also saw this sight, and they also heard Saint Woodcutter and Fu Riluo's conversation. Granny C shook her head. "Who is this foolish old man? He looks foolish, and to actually dare to make an oath to Earth Count with the respectable king of the devil race? He needs to be careful not to have even his underwear trick away by Fu Riluo." Everyone in disabled elderly village nodded their heads. Qin Mu said carefully, "Granny, look at this face in the sky. Does it look similar to the face of Saint Woodcutter on the mural in our Saint Arrival Mountain?" Granny C examined it and she gave a shudder. Wasn't this face that of Saint Woodcutter? So it's the saint. Granny C showed off her beauty, and it was very charming when she smiled. In that case, he won't be at a disadvantage when making an oath to Earth Count with Fu Riluo. There are so many crafty people in Heavenly Saint Cult, and they had all learned it from great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, so, in terms of craftiness, this saint is our old ancestor. Everyone's mind was blank by her smile, and they just selectively forgot about Granny C scolding Saint Woodcutter, a foolish old man, involuntarily. Lu Li's gaze flickered and she looked into the distance. She was about to chase after Qin Mu when Fu Riluo said calmly, "When this concerns the existence of my Luofu Heaven, it's best for Dao friend Lu Li to not make any reckless move." Lu Li's beautiful brows frowned. This chance was rare, and she really wanted to seize Qin Mu, but she was also very afraid of that face in the sky. If she forcefully made a move, Fu Riluo might even make a move on her from being threatened, so she resisted herself. "Don't worry. I said I will bring this brat to you, so I won't eat my words," Fu Riluo said. Lu Li chuckled and said, "If you dare to eat your words, I can assist Supreme Emperor Heaven in getting rid of your devil race." Fu Riluo shook his head. "You won't. Heavenly Teacher is from founding Emperor Celestial Heaven. The grudge between the 2 of you is even great that your grudge to the devil race. It's impossible to resolve." Lu Li took a glance at the direction where Qin Mu and the rest had escaped, and she suppressed herself. She wasn't afraid of Fu Riluo or Saint Woodcutter, but if the both of them attacked her at the same time, she wouldn't have it easy. "However, I promise you I can definitely do it." Fu Riluo's front face was signing a pact of Earth Count with the face in the sky, while the face on the left was talking to Lu Li. "He has already suffered from my divine art, so no matter if it's a mirror or a water surface, he will still fall into my grasp." Only then did Lu Li place her heart down and said with a smile, "In regards to your art of space, I am indeed very impressed." Qi Jui frowned slightly and said, "So, Provincial Governor, the agreement between you and I." Lu Li smiled at him sweetly, and it was so lovely and sweet that it was terrifying. With a rough voice, she said, "Whether or not I should lend Qin Mu to you will depend on what you plan to do. Even though young Master Qi is a noble of the celestial heavens, the sky is high and the emperor is far. Even his majesty wouldn't be able to control the provincial governor that's in control of an area, right?" Qi Jui said with an unmoved expression, "I understand. If you lend me, I will give you benefits. Finally, Qin Mu and the rest hurried to Li City, and only then did they let out a sigh of relief. Li City was long stationed with soldiers and horses. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, True God Pang Yu and the rest were holding the lines. When they saw them hurrying back safely, only then were they at ease. Apothecary took out a mirror to tidy himself up to prevent him from losing his image. Qin Mu popped his head to take a look, and his expression changed drastically. His eyes stared at the mirror, and inside the mirror, Fu Riluo was walking towards him. Apothecary coincidentally kept the mirror, and he said with a smile, "Muer, you don't have any lesser mirrors than me, so why do you need to borrow mine?" Qin Mu shook his head and cried out, "Granny, I've suffered from the same move again." He talked about how he got kidnapped by Fu Riluo the previous time, and everyone in disabled elderly village revealed a look of disdain. Cripple sneered and said, "Muer, to fall at the same place twice. You have disappointed our teaching." Blind nodded his head. "I saw Muer is still young and too innocent." Apothecary sighed and said, "That's right, village chief, that old fogey always nags that Qin Mu is too innocent and is afraid of him losing out. His words have come true, to fall for the same thing twice." Cold sweat rolled down Qin Mu's forehead. "Stop saying cynical remarks. What should I do?" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 597. Fu Riluo in his eyes. Mute did a few strokes, and Deaf caught them in his eyes. He said, "This is simple, just don't look in the mirror, you aren't a little girl." Mute said that, "Not me." Apothecary took out the mirror and aimed it at Qin Mu to examine his reaction. He saw Qin Mu's eyes immediately going out of focus, as if there was a figure walking out from his eyes. He immediately kept the mirror and said, "It's easy not to look in the mirror, but what about washing his face? Or if he meets other people that shine their mirror at Qin Mu? He just needs to arrange a devil or a spy and use a mirror to shine at Qin Mu. Muer just need to take a look and he will fall into the move again." The divine arts practitioners that had submitted to the devils wouldn't be low in numbers. There's definitely not only Tianfengo. Butcher snatched the mirror from him and shone it at Qin Mu. Qin Mu's eyes went out of focus again as he stared at the mirror. The body of a Fu Riluo walked over in his eyes and was slightly closer than just now. Butcher jumped in shock and hurriedly flipped the mirror over. Only then did the Fu Riluo in Qin Mu's eyes vanish. "How powerful!" Butcher couldn't help praising. "Fu Riluo's divine art is truly strange, to actually be able to come out from Qin Mu's eyes. Why don't we just lure him out and gather a bunch of true gods to chop him to death? We will see how he terrorize you again." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "It's useless, he doesn't really appear. The mirror will only activate his divine art, and once the divine art is activated, he will pull me to his side, he won't appear in front of us at all." Butcher praised again. To actually be able to achieve such a step? He's truly remarkable. Mute snatched the mirror and also shone it at Qin Mu. Qin Mu involuntarily looked over, and the Fu Riluo in his eyes walked another distance closer. Mute hurriedly flipped the mirror over and said sternly, "ABA." Blind hurriedly took over the mirror and planned to shine it at Qin Mu when Granny became furious and rewarded him with a punch on his head. She said angrily, "You old farts. If you shine some more, Muer is going to be taken away by that three-faced weird man." Blind was furious. "Granny, they had all shone, so why did you only beat me?" Granny C snatched the mirror away, and Cripple was waiting to try on one side. When he saw Granny C protecting her calf, he could only hold himself back. Granny C also wanted to shine the mirror at Qin Mu, but he was still her child that was raised up by him, so she could only resist the temptation. However, she always felt itchy and wanted to shine the mirror on him. In disabled elderly village, other than Cripple, the one with the most playful heart was her. If he can't look at the mirror and he also can't pull Fu Riluo over, doesn't this mean that this divine art will remain forever in Muer's eyes? Everyone was out of ideas. Even though they all had remarkable abilities, Fu Riluo's divine arts were truly bizarre. They didn't know how to solve it. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and True God Pang Yu walked over. "Fellow Dao friends are back? We were still organizing the army, so it wasn't convenient to save you. May everyone pardon us. Imperial Preceptor always has ideas. Maybe he can think of an idea. Everyone hurriedly told Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor about it, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "To actually have such a thing? Let me take a look." After saying so, he took out a mirror from his chest and planned to shine it at Qin Mu. Butcher, Blind, and the rest had weird expressions. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was a middle-aged man, he was still handsome and well-dressed. It was obvious he paid attention to his appearance and also carried a mirror with him. Granny C clenched her fist tightly and was ready to hit Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's head. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor saw this situation and he placed down his mirror while saying with a smile, "Dao Friend C, if I don't activate the divine art in his eyes, how could I think of a method to break it? Please put aside your hostility." Granny C said, "Don't shine for too long." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shone the mirror at Qin Mu, and he saw the figure of Fu Riluo, who was currently walking out from Qin Mu's eyes. He was astonished and hurriedly covered the mirror while muttering irresolutely to himself, "Excellent divine art. This kind of divine art is imprinted in the eyes of Cult Master Qin. One would fall for it once they looked at him in the eye. Fu Riluo's divine art is actually remarkable to such an extent." Granny C hurriedly said, "Does Imperial Preceptor have any method to solve it?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor paced to and fro. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Why don't I take another look?" Granny C couldn't resist any longer and gave a hard blow on his head. Everyone was stunned. Even Emperor Yanfeng didn't dare to hammer Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's head, yet Granny C actually dared. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor accepted the beating calmly and said, "Dao Friend C, it's still not enough for me to solve Fu Riluo's divine art with just a look. Maybe if I can have a few more looks, I might just be able to find the way to solve this." Granny C said coldly, "What if you can't?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said solemnly, "If in the morning I was to gain knowledge of the correct path, I will be able to die without regrets at sunset." Granny C was still not familiar with him, or else she would have kicked him away long ago like how she had done to Blind. She took a glance at True God Pangyu and asked patiently, "The abilities of a true god are remarkable. You must have a method to solve this, right?" True God Pangyu hesitated for a moment. He also has the intention of shining the mirror at Qin Mu, but he felt that it was difficult for him to escape the fist of this woman. "If Imperial Preceptor can't, I also can't. I admire Imperial Preceptor's paths, skills, and divine arts very much. Fu Riluo's attainments in divine arts are actually even higher than mine. It is especially so a divine art in the eyes. In terms of attainments in divine art, the one on par with Fu Riluo can only be Heavenly Teacher. You guys should be finding Heavenly Teacher." Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Saint Woodcutter indeed has remarkable abilities, so he just might be able to break Fu Riluo's divine art. Heavenly Teacher is now in Luofu Heaven. It's not difficult to find him. True God Pangyu hesitated for a moment. "By right, I should be bringing you guys over, but now that the two armies are in a face-off, if the devil race doesn't withdraw their army, I will still have to stay here." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart was rather moved and he wanted to meet this saint. However, he was also impeded. He didn't have the time to head to Luofu Heaven. The world barrier between Luofu Heaven and Supreme Emperor Heaven was already very thin, so it wasn't hard to go to Luofu Heaven. When the devil race attacked Supreme Emperor Heaven, it was also the devil gods that had torn open the world barrier, allowing devils to flow in continuously in Supreme Emperor Heaven. Granny C was delighted and she said with a smile, "I'll follow Muir to see the first saint of my heavenly devil cult." She couldn't conceal her excitement. Saint Woodcutter imparting his teachings under the tree and imparting the scriptures on the rock to Founding Master. Founding Master established a cult and created Heavenly Saint Cult. Afterward, the cult master of every generation was the disciple of Saint Woodcutter, and they need to experience his teachings on the rock once. To the disciples of Heavenly Saint Cult, Saint Woodcutter was an existence that was high above, requiring everyone to look up and worship him. To be able to meet this legend was a huge dream to the disciples of the cult. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and he looked at the excited Granny C. Finally, he still decided not to tell her the truth. Saint Woodcutter is the originator of Heavenly Saint Cult, but he had never heard of Heavenly Saint Cult before. Even him imparting his scriptures on the rock was only a moment of interest, imparting his teachings to Founding Master. If Granny C knows about this, she will definitely be dejected. He thought to himself. True God Pang Yu said, my Supreme Emperor Heaven had once attacked back at Luofu Heaven, and I was the commander then. However, the counterattack had failed, but I still had some understanding of the terrain there. There are swamps everyone in Luofu Heaven, and there are even mirrors formed by shattered pieces of space. Granny C took out a white silk ribbon to cover Qin Mu's eyes. She said, this will do. Mu'er, you can release your primordial spirit out. Use the eyes of your primordial spirit to look. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor hurriedly said, that won't do. Fu Riluo's divine art is also reflected onto his primordial spirit. If his primordial spirit looks at a mirror, it will also activate Fu Riluo's divine art. Granny C said in astonishment. Fu Riluo actually has such kind of ability? Mu'er, release your primordial spirit. Qin Mu listened to her, and his primordial spirit was projected out to stand on an auspicious cloud that floated behind his head. Granny C used the mirror to shine at Qin Mu, and Qin Mu's primordial spirit looked towards the mirror. The eyes of his primordial spirit instantly went out of focus as he stared at the mirror. Fu Riluo's figure appeared in his eyes, and he walked out. At this moment, Fu Riluo has already walked to the position of Qin Mu's pupils. Granny C examined in detail, and she kept her mirror back with satisfaction on finally accomplishing a load on her mind. She said with a smile, True God Pang Yu, how do we go to Luofu Heaven? I'll open up space and send you guys over. Qin Mu's eyes were wiped black, and he could only use his other senses to feel the surroundings. His naked eyes couldn't see the surroundings, so Granny C led him by the hand and pulled him forward. True God Pang Yu tore open the space and revealed another world. Luofu isn't like Supreme Emperor Heaven. There's danger in every corner of Luofu Heaven. You guys need to be careful. Granny C held onto his hand and rushed into the crack excitedly. The Dragon Qilin and Hu Linger also wanted to follow over, but True God Pang Yu had already closed the crack in space, so they could only give up. Apothecary said solemnly, Let us go to Fengdu from Great Ruins to find Village Chief. We can think of ideas together as well. Linger, you frequently go to Fengdu through between life and death. You shall lead the way. Hu Linger acknowledged, and she said to the disappointed Dragon Qilin, Young Master has gone to Luofu Heaven? Fatty Dragon, follow us to Fengdu. The Dragon Qilin's heart was empty, and he shook his head to say, I want to stay here and wait for Cult Master to be back. He had gone in a hurry and didn't have time to make my rations. Hu Linger said with a smile. With Grandpa Apothecary around, how would you have a lack of ration? Young Master's art of healing and art of pills are all learned from Grandpa Apothecary. The Dragon Qilin was overjoyed, and he immediately shook his body, revealing his true form that was 120 yards. He smiled apologetically and said, Old Masters, please come on to Little Dragon's back. Little Dragon's footsteps are rather fast, and I can bring Old Masters towards Fengdu. I have also been to Fengdu before. Cripple, Butcher, Blind, and the rest climbed onto his back, and Butcher said with a smile, I had originally said to let this fatty go onto the table with the hen dragons in the village during New Year. He could be a main dish as well. Never would I expect him to be even more sensible that the hen dragons. Those hen dragons have rebelled. The last time I returned to the village, they pecked me until my entire face was bloody. Apothecary said with a smile, What pills does Fatty Dragon eat? How much do you eat? The Dragon Qilin said in a hurry, Little Dragon eats Scarlet Fire Spirit Pills, Fire Element Divine Vitality Pills, and Water Element Divine Vitality Pills. One meal I need to eat. 1 bucket. 1 bucket every meal? Apothecary was astonished and cried out, 3 kinds of spirit pills, that's 3 buckets. 3 meals every day, that's 9 buckets. Your appetite ain't small, eh? You actually didn't turn more poor from your eating habits. The Dragon Qilin was also shocked. He was surprised and delighted. He had originally wanted to push his luck and eat 1 bucket of spirit pills a day. Never did he expect it to become 9 buckets. Apothecary did some calculation, and he said, 9 buckets of spirit pills is a little much, but luckily, I have the money so I can still feed you. Blind was very envious. There were many rich people in the village. Apothecary helps to treat officials and nobles so his money flowed in endlessly. Numerous women of noble family came forward upon hearing his reputation. Deaf's paintings were also like hot cakes. Butcher sold meat daily and Mute forged ironwares daily so they could also have enough to survive. There was no need to talk about cripple. Meanwhile, Granny C's family was in charge of Heavenly Saint Cult's treasury, so she naturally didn't need to worry about having not enough to eat and drink. Only Blind had to survive by relying on fortune-telling, so his life was slightly bitter and hard. This was why he had slight resentment to the wealthy people in the village. He thought to himself, "Luckily village chief is poorer than me, what a pity he's dead." Hulinger's eyeballs rotated randomly, but she didn't say the truth. She thought to herself, "Fatty Dragon is going to eat so much spirit pills in a day. Young master will definitely be in for a shock when he comes back. I also like to see how fat he will get." In Luofu heaven, Qin Mu raised his hand secretly to peel off the golden willow leaf that was covering his third eye. Granny C smacked his hand down and nagged, "This eye of yours is weird. Don't peel it off recklessly." Qin Mu argued, "Granny, I can't see anything and it's also not convenient for me to walk. I can't always let Granny lead me, can I? What if we were in a dangerous situation? I will only be a burden to Granny. You still can't take it off." Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 598, Repaying the Kindness. "Muir, let me take a look at your eye." Granny C stared at his eyes for a while, and she didn't see Fu Riluo in this eye. She used a mirror to reflect, but there was still no trace of Fu Riluo in these eyes. Only then was she at ease, and she instructed, "You can use this eye, but don't use your magic power. Granny will handle any danger we meet. After we meet Saint Woodcutter, you will still have to use this golden willow leaf to cover it up properly." Qin Mu nodded his head and kept the golden willow leaf. It was still his first time using the third eye in the heart of his brows to observe the world. He looked around curiously, and the world as seen by this eye was somewhat different from the things he saw with his two normal eyes. When his two normal eyes looked at divine arts practitioners, they would see the outer appearance, while in the vision of his third eye, everything became strange. When he looked at Granny C, other than seeing Granny C's outer appearance, he could even clearly see Granny C's divine treasures and even Granny C's primordial spirit. The most terrifying thing was when Qin Mu saw Granny C's primordial spirit. He actually felt that it was delicious. There was a pang of hunger making him want to eat her primordial spirit very much. He didn't know where this feeling was coming from, but he felt his stomach was rumbling with hunger, having a terrifying desire to just grab Granny C's primordial spirit out from her body to swallow. The starvation was real, and this made him have an urge to swallow everything. When they were in the ruins of Without Embroiling City, he opened his third eye for the first time, and Earth Count appeared to smack his jade pendant into his third eye. Mute, Blind, and the rest then forged the golden willow leaf to seal this eye. Therefore he didn't feel any difference. Now, after opening his third eye, only then did he notice the peculiarity. Is it the problem of this eye, or is it the problem of Luofu heaven? Qin Mu suppressed his urge to swallow Granny C's primordial spirit, and he fell in deep thoughts. It shouldn't be the problem of Luofu heaven. Luofu heaven is a world of the devils. Even if there's a problem, it should only be the problem of the devil chi. The devil chi wouldn't make me feel hungry, so this problem still lies in this eye. Strange. Why would I feel hunger when this eye opens? He was puzzled and could only put this question aside. He followed Granny C to head forward to the closest sacrificial altar. Saint Woodcutter and the 24 gods had constructed numerous tall pyramid sacrificial altars used to sacrifice Supreme Emperor Heaven, forcing Fu Riluo to stop the war. To prevent the sacrificial altars from being destroyed, Saint Woodcutter would definitely protect these sacrificial altars, and before these altars are destroyed, Fu Riluo and the rest would also not make a move and clash with Supreme Emperor Heaven. Heading to the sacrificial altars to find Saint Woodcutter was the best choice of action. Qin Mu looked around, and the Luofu heaven he saw was basically the same as the Luofu heaven Fu Riluo showed him. It was even more treacherous. Huge planets moved above Luofu heaven, and the magnetic force of the planets was disrupting with Luofu heaven's magnetic force, causing the ground to quake violently. The magnitude to the earthquake was so terrifying that it caused volcanoes to erupt. The speed of the storm even surpassed the speed of the storm by dozens of times. The gales were like blades and seemed to be spirit weapons with the strongest power. Everywhere they blew past, and even volcanoes that just rose were turned into powder under the sharp gusts. The most terrifying thing was still the ocean. Waves that reached the sky was moving at terrifyingly high speed, and the speed of the waves has also surpassed the speed of sound, destroying everything in its path. Earthquakes, gales, waves, volcanoes, this was earth, water, wind, and fire. These elements had made Luofu heaven unsuitable for any lifeforms to live on it. This place was that scary. As a result, the space had become unstable too. The shattered space formed a long and narrow crack between heaven and earth. Like mirrors without any thickness, it reflected sights that were either far or near. These space cracks were either so long that one couldn't see the end of them, or they were very short, being only 2 to 3 feet. Because there was no thickness, it was very difficult to notice, therefore every step had to be very careful. If one was to pass through a crack in space by accident, they would most likely be split cleanly into 2 halves. The space was too sharp, and one would probably realize they were already dead after they were sliced. "It is you. You actually didn't commit any trouble?" In the gate, the voice of Elder Messenger of Death traveled over, and he sounded astonished. Qin Mu waved his hand and closed Gate of Heaven influence. "Granny, let us go." Granny C nodded her head gently and looked at him. She said with an expression of gratification, "Muir has really grown up." Just as they were about to leave, a feeble voice suddenly came from a place far away. "Much thanks." Qin Mu heard this voice and he was slightly stunned. He turned his head back and saw that the soul of that devil god was currently crumbling and dispersing in the devil's celestial palace. The majestic palace was also crumbling rapidly, and stars were being wiped out one after another. "Muir, there's no need to look anymore. His soul has already dispersed." Granny C held his hand and brought him out of the divine treasures quickly. The wish of this devil god wasn't fulfilled, so his soul didn't disperse. Otherwise, his soul would have long turned into dust. When his soul disperses, his divine treasures will also crumble. Just as they rushed out, a heart-palpitating shockwave came from behind, and the divine treasures were obliterated in the rumbles. Violent explosions swept out in all directions. Granny C hurriedly brought Qin Mu to escape far away, and the shockwave from the explosions came assaulting over, throwing them both high up. Granny C tried her best to spread open great overarching heavenly stars force field to protect Qin Mu, and at this moment, a beam of black light flew out from the destruction and broke through great overarching heavenly stars force field, moving like a flood dragon. "Muir assisted you and send the souls of your people to Yudu, yet you still dare to harm him?" Granny C was furious and wanted to make a move, when that beam of black light circled around to the back of Qin Mu's head and transformed into a black glow. In the center of the black glow were lines of intense red light which formed a red circle as though it was a blood-colored devil moon. Qin Mu turned his head back, but he couldn't see this devil moon. He hurriedly took out a mirror to reflect the back of his head, and he saw the devil moon slowly swirling behind him. In the black glow were countless devil writings that were continuously changing and flowing. Granny C's anger turned into joy, and she said with a smile, "At least you still have a conscience. Muir, this devil moon is transformed from the remaining energy in that devil god's divine treasures. He had used it to repay you. This thing is not bad. It can help you increase the cultivation of your devil path." Qin Mu also immediately felt the appearance of this devil moon, and his devil vitality was also increasing rapidly. It might be assumed that not much longer, he would be able to break through 7-star divine treasure in one go. "Granny, that devil god's soul should be able to see that I'm a human. Why did he still help me?" Qin Mu was puzzled, and he asked. Granny C walked towards the sacrificial altars in the distance, and she said, "You are clearly a human, so why did you help the spirits of those devils, sending them to Yudu?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Granny C said with a smile, "You have the heart of a newborn child, and he also knows how to repay the kindness. There are also heroes in the devil race. There are also people worthy of respect." Qin Mu and Granny C were defending against the huge waves that were rushing over, and they saw a huge wave that was over 10,000 feet being sliced apart by an astonishing space crack, splitting the wave into two halves. Stars flashed in front and behind Granny Sea and formed great overarching heavenly stars force field, and she borrowed the force field to sense the dangers and her surroundings. At the same time, the force field could defend against the disaster of Luofu Heaven. Granny Sea was already in existence who had entered God Realm, and even though Luofu Heaven was dangerous, it still wasn't a threat to her life. Qin Mu looked around, and he looked at this place that was as terrifying as hell. There were countless souls floating around, and those were souls of Luofu Heaven's devils that had died. This hugely raised his appetite. He hurriedly controlled his desire of swallowing those souls, and he felt fear. What monster has this I turned me into? Right at this moment, they suddenly saw a huge corpse of a devil god proned in the center of a storm, on the barren plains in front of them. No matter how strong the storm was, it was unable to move the corpse at all. They came to the front, and even when the corpse was proned on the ground, it was still over 100 yards tall. This corpse grew wings which had also turned into bones, and his 4 hooves were like huge bull hooves, however, they were shiny golden. Not only that, Qin Mu even saw glowing divine treasures in the body of this devil god. There were sun, moon, stars, and even land inside. The divine treasures were already destroyed, and the land was submerged in water. Qin Mu and Granny Sea entered from a hole in the divine treasure, and they saw the water had already submerged the entire land in the divine treasures. Even the sun, moon, and stars in the sky were broken here and there. What was even stranger was that there were even houses in that land, and numerous houses were already submerged under the water. This was once a refugee camp of the devil race. Looks like it was only destroyed several hundred years ago. Granny Sea was astonished, and she pondered. Could it be that after the disaster of Luofu Heaven, some devil gods were willing to sacrifice their corporeal body for the devil life forms to live in their own divine treasures? Qin Mu used his third eye to look around, and he saw in a place far away, above the broken galaxy, there was a devil god celestial palace that was already dilapidated. In the divine bridge, divine treasure of this devil god, a flying bridge was connected to the devil celestial palace. He could faintly see that there was a soul in the devil celestial palace which was very faint. It stood there alone and seemed to be in sorrow. He had an urge of wanting to fly over and eat this sorrowful soul, but his inner heart could no longer feel hunger. Instead, his heart was filled with respect. This devil god only had his soul left. He had let out his divine treasures for his clansmen to reside in, to protect the lives of his clansmen, yet his corporeal body also couldn't defend against the natural disasters. His corporeal body died. His clansmen might have lived in his divine treasure for a long time, but in the end, his divine treasures were also broken through by the natural disasters. He had exhausted his primordial spirit, and only his soul wasn't wiped out. However, his clansmen have still died. His soul must have been standing here for a few hundred years already. Qin Mu looked around, and this third eye could see numerous wandering souls. Those were the devil commoners that had died in the divine treasures of this god. The messenger of death didn't come here, and Qin Mu looked towards the life and death divine treasure of this devil god. The life and death divine treasure had already been destroyed by this devil god, and that was probably the reason why the souls of these devil commoners were trapped here. Every race has inspiring and tragic figures. Qin Mu closed the eye on the heart of his brows. He felt disgusted at his thoughts of wanting to eat these souls. This was definitely not his ideas. It was definitely not his subconsciousness. He couldn't have such evil subconsciousness. No matter what is this thing that's affecting my thoughts. You disgust me. Qin Mu opened his eye and turned around. Yudu language came from his mouth, and a gate of heaven influence rose behind him. The gate opened wide, and this time, he didn't execute soul guide. He changed the divine art instead. He wanted to send these spirits of the devil race to Yudu. In the divine treasures of the devil god, waves of cold wind blew and went into gate of heaven influence, flying into the darkness. On the other side of gate of heaven influence, numerous small boats sailed over and fetched the spirits. Not long later, the cold wind stopped, and a lantern shone its light over onto Qin Mu's face. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 599, Divine Art. Qin Mu's face that was covered with the white ribbon was stunned for a moment. After a moment, his face broke into a radiant smile and he caught up to Granny C with quick steps. The third eye on the heart of his brows looked at Granny C. He could see Granny C's primordial spirit yet this time. He no longer had the desire to eat Granny C's primordial spirit. His heart was in peace. Maybe there was still faces as beautiful as Granny C in this world, but under every beautiful face, not everyone would have a soul as beautiful and kind as Granny C. In fact, Qin Mu was truly grateful that it was Granny C that had picked him up and raised him up painstakingly. His kindness was inherited from none other than Granny C. Even though she was known as Heavenly Devil Cult Saintess and carried the name of the evil woman who killed her own husband, she was actually the kindest people in Disabled Elderly Village. Every person in Disabled Elder Village had their own evil and they hid from the world for all sorts of reasons, entering great ruins. Granny C was the only one that got forced into great ruins by herself. She felt that she was a femme fatale because of her beauty. That was why she rather dressed up as an old woman and not see the people of the world fight over one another after seeing her beauty. Other people wanted to make themselves prettier and treated their beauty as a weapon. On the other hand, she was trying her best to make herself uglier. I can already control the desire brought by this eye. Qin Mu was gratified and examined the surroundings. Even though he could see numerous broken souls of the devil race, he could already accept what he saw and no longer had the thoughts of wanting to absorb them. Granny C turned her head back and said sweetly, "Mu'er, your aura seems to have changed. Something had happened. Something very marvelous." Qin Mu was in great mood and he said with a smile, "Something that makes me happy." Granny asked curiously, "What's the marvelous thing? Tell me about it." Qin Mu said loudly, "I feel Granny is the prettiest woman in the world. You are also the kindest woman in the world." Granny C shook her head and the pearl earrings dangling from her ears swayed. "How can a demoness from Heavenly Devil Cult be the kindest person? I'm not. Mu'er, you are then the kindest person." Qin Mu laughed and said, "The cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult is also no kind soul." Granny's feeling also somehow become much better and the two of them talked and laughed as they head towards the closest sacrificial altar. Suddenly, Qin Mu and Granny C stopped at the same time and looked over there. Far away, the sacrificial altar was as tall as a mountain and there were steps on all four sides. The steps were like a pathway to heaven, leading up into the clouds. The sacrificial altar was so tall that it was like a magnificent mountain standing upright. On the steps, there were countless runes that flickered on and off. These were runes used to sacrifice Luofu heaven. Saint Woodcutter constructed this sacrificial altar using the method of blood sacrifice from the devil race, but he wanted to sacrifice the entire world, so the effect of one sacrificial altar wasn't enough. He required numerous sacrificial altars, and only then would he be able to tear Luofu heaven into pieces, transforming it into pure energy. This action definitely has an unknown drawback, so Saint Woodcutter didn't dare to use it easily as well. It was just that Supreme Emperor Heaven really has no chances of victory, so he had no choice but to do this. The reason why Supreme Emperor Heaven has no chances of victory wasn't because the devil race was too powerful. It was because Supreme Emperor Heaven had to be destroyed, and only then was the devil race able to enter eternal peace. The devil race wasn't strong. What was strong was the power to destroy Supreme Emperor Heaven. At this moment, on the top of the sacrificial altar, a god stood there wielding a battle axe. With chi and blood rushed into the sky. Under the sacrificial altar, tens of thousands of devil soldiers were like a bunch of insects swarming up the peak and attacking towards the top of the sacrificial altar. That god stood on the peak of the sacrificial altar and waved his battle axe. Snow-bright lights slashed down from the peak, and as they swept through, countless limbs flew into the air. One man and one battle axe blocked down tens of thousands of devil soldiers, turning their blood into rivers and dyeing the sacrificial altar red. The blood flowed down step by step. WHRRNG, WHRRNG, WHRRNG. Sound of the battle axe swing rang out wave after waves. Corpses had already filled up the steps, but the other devils were still not afraid of death. They continued to rush forward like a flood and climbed up the top of the sacrificial altar frantically, wanting to kill that god. Granny C, These devils are only ordinary divine arts practitioners. They are definitely not a match for this god. Qin Mu saw this in eyes and his heart was puzzled. Why do they want to give up their lives just like that? Granny C was also slightly puzzled. These devils were indeed sending themselves to death. Even if there were strong practitioners of divine bridge realm among them, they were far from being a match for that god. That god was one of the 24 honored gods that Saint Woodcutter has invited, and he had powerful abilities. Even if he was inferior to Saint Woodcutter, he was still pretty remarkable among the gods. Even if more devils poured forward, he still couldn't be eliminated. Fu Riluo wouldn't be so dumb. Granny C pondered and said, "In that case, what's the aim of these devils rushing forward to their death? These devils won't waste much of this god's energy. Could a devil god be hiding among these devils?" Qin Mu focused his gaze, and his third eye could see the divine treasures of everyone very clearly. He didn't discover any devil gods hiding among them. This is a blood sacrifice. He suddenly came to a realization and cried out, "Fu Riluo is planning on using a blood sacrifice in exchange for the descent of a terrifying being. There's definitely a devil god nearby that's preparing to carry out the sacrificial rite." Just as he said until here, the blood on the sacrificial altar suddenly stopped flowing. All of the corpses and bodies of living devils froze, and they involuntarily floated into the air. Afterward, no matter if they were corpses or living bodies, their bodies all disintegrated in an instant, and their flesh, blood, bones, and even primordial spirits were vibrated into the smallest atom, transforming into a blood river that swirled around that sacrificial altar and that god. That god on the peak of the sacrificial altar swung his battle axe and exploded with terrifying divine might. The moves of the battle axe were exquisite, and the spell divine art he executed were also extremely astonishing. Yet he couldn't break this sacrificial rite. Qin Mu immediately looked around the surroundings and searched places that are even further, trying to find that devil god that was sacrificing his own clansmen. That devil god that was hosting this blood sacrifice needed to be here personally, so he was definitely nearby. Granny C had also came to a realization and began to look around. She has already constructed her human body network of vital chi circulation, and among them included Blind's divine eyes. Her pupil divine arts were exactly the same as Blind's 9 heavens eyes awakening skill, but it wasn't as exquisite as Blind. Even so, with her cultivation on the god realm executing the divine eyes, her eyesight was also extremely terrifying. Yet after searching around, she still couldn't find where the devil god that was hosting the sacrificial rite was hiding. If I knew, I would have called Blind along. Granny C was a little anxious. Yet at this moment, Qin Mu, who was beside her, gave a low cry, "Granny, I found him." Granny C was slightly stunned. She didn't have the time to think and hurriedly asked, "Where is he?" Qin Mu pointed his finger up into the sky above the sacrificial altar, and Granny C hurriedly took a look. She could only see the blood river in the sky swirling furiously in a circle, but she still couldn't see where that devil god was at exactly. This Eye of Mu'er is indeed extraordinary. To actually be able to find that devil god. She was slightly bewildered. This eye, what's its origin? Why does even Earth Count want to seal it? Even though Qin Mu could only open the eye on the heart of his brows, but his eyesight was extremely strange. He could see things that other divine eyes couldn't, and that devil god's method of hiding was extremely marvelous. It was evident that he had a kind of extremely strange concealment divine art. He hid inside a space crack above the sacrificial altar and cast his spell. He sometimes upside down, sometimes having messy and loose hair, disorderly footsteps, and seemed to be crazy and wild. Qin Mu said solemnly, "Granny, look at the direction where my vital chi thread is extending to. I will show you the precise location with my vital chi thread. You must kill him." Granny C shouted, "You are not allowed to use Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. You can only use your vital chi thread to point out the direction. Pass me great educational heavenly devil scriptures." Qin Mu's heart moved slightly and a ball of thread flew out. Next, his vital chi transformed into thread, and a thread stretched out quickly into the sky above the sacrificial altar. This vital chi thread pointed straight at the place where the devil god that was casting the spell was hiding. At the same time, Granny C controlled the scriptures of great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and countless runes danced in the sky like a thread. The thread transformed by the scriptures and stuck closely to Qin Mu's vital chi thread, extending rapidly. Granny C's magic power poured into the writings in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and this was imparted by Founding Master of Heavenly Saint Cult. Founding Master refined the scriptures into treasure, and as long as the scriptures don't open up, it was a small and delicate ball of thread. However, if it was spread open and expanded with vital chi, that would be countless writings. Not only that, the scriptures could be used as spirit weapons, and it possessed extremely strong power. Granny C once used the scriptures to fight with numerous strong practitioners in Border Dragon City, and when Qin Mu entered the darkness of Great Ruins with Village Chief for the first time, the scriptures were also one of the treasures he had brought along with him to protect him. It was just that afterward, Qin Mu had his own spirit weapon, so he rarely used great educational heavenly devil scriptures anymore. The scripture was already no longer convenient for him to use. Yet to Granny C, the scriptures was the best spirit weapon for her, and it was the most compatible with her technique and nature. She could even use great educational heavenly devil scriptures to execute transformations that only divine art could execute. It was only because Qin Mu was the heavenly devil cult master, so it was natural for great educational heavenly devil scriptures to be kept by Qin Mu. Thus she didn't ask for it from Qin Mu. This vital chi thread of Qin Mu extended 50 miles, and it was about to reach the hiding spot of that devil god. However, the durability of his vital chi thread had reached its limit. If he could execute Overlord Body, he could extend his vital chi 6 times more than now, but if he didn't execute his technique, his vital chi could only extend 50 miles. Mu'er, you can never execute your technique. With your vital chi thread confirming the direction, I will be able to kill him. Granny C instructed once again, and a divine bridge stretched across the sky behind her. Her primordial spirit appeared and crossed the bridge, reaching the celestial palaces on the end of the divine bridge. Granny C shouted, and there was actually divine might bursting forth from her body. Outside the southern heavenly gate, light shone into the 9 heavens, and the writings of great educational heavenly devil scripture was like the finest spirit snake slithering into the hiding spot of that devil god. That devil god was in the most crucial part of the spell. Light instantly rushed into the sky, and a silver line pierced right into the heart of his brows. That devil god was astonished, and he hurriedly grabbed towards the heart of his brows, pinching onto a thread. He was slightly stunned. What is this? Beside Qin Mu, Granny C's beautiful hair fluttered, and she was like a butterfly with her clothes dancing in the wind. Divine art after divine art came bombarding over. That devil god had a huge change in expression, and he was about to pull this thread out from his body when great educational heavenly devil scriptures suddenly expanded, transforming into hundreds of divine arts which exploded. Bang, 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 bang. Countless vibrations came out from that space crack, and next, the blood of the devil god poured out from that space crack. It was like a wound in the sky which had blood pouring out like a waterfall. Granny C let out a sigh of relief and kept great educational heavenly devil scriptures. She raised her head and saw that the blood sacrifice hasn't ended. Even though that devil god was dead, the blood sacrifice was already completed. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 600 and Withered Old Soldier. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was still a ball of thread, and Granny C wanted to hand the ball of thread over to Qin Mu, who shook his head. Granny, keep the scriptures first. There are still many dangers in Luofu heaven. It's useless for it to be with me. Granny C took out a small bamboo basket, and it was a small flower basket that had a circular top and squarish bottom. There were also some cloth strips and things like scissors and silver needles. They should be her spirit weapons. The two of them looked at the swirling blood river in the sky, and they saw that blood river trapping that god wielding that battle axe in the center. The goal of this sacrifice didn't merely seem to be summoning a god. The blood river didn't transform into the blood light which summons the gods, and instead, lumps of blood would break off and transform into different kinds of marvelous markings. Those runes were very profound, and they should be the sacrificial method of the devil race. Sacrificial rites were originally from the devil race, and Qin Mu had learned some methods before. Ghost transferring God dispatching runes command was a kind of sacrificial method that was from Dutian Devil King. Dutian Devil King had spread this sacrificial method to Eternal Peace with the aim of summoning himself over to invade Eternal Peace. After meeting Qin Mu, he dropped that thought. The devil race also has numerous heavens. Dutian and Luofu heaven were one part of the devil race's heavens, and these two worlds have sunk into destruction. They were both searching for ways to extend the lives and numbers of their people. In fact, most of the sacrificial methods were from the devil race. The devil race had created numerous sacrificial methods and built their own unique civilization, which was very different from Eternal Peace and Supreme Emperor Heaven. The human race has also learned some sacrificial methods from the devil race, and for example, numerous sacrificial methods in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were also cultivation techniques of the devil path. The human race not only learned the sacrificial methods and also numerous other devil techniques. For example, Roland's Golden Palace's shaman spells was from Shaman God Kuei, and Shaman God Kuei was a devil god that was dispatched from the celestial heavens to Yudu. Something is not right. Granny C examined the blood river around the sacrificial altar, and more of those blood-colored runes appeared. Meanwhile, under the encirclement of the blood river, that god that had come from great ruins seemed to have been trapped. He tried to crash out of this sacrificial rites repeatedly, but he could never break out of it. He even tried to rush out of the sacrificial altar, but he couldn't rush out either. The abilities of that devil god that was hosting the sacrificial rites weren't strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died under Granny C's surprise attack. His abilities should be far inferior to the battle-axe god, but his sacrificial method was profound. Even when he had died in Granny C's hands, the blood sacrifice could still trap the battle-axe god in the center and made him unable to escape. He is planning to sacrifice this battle-axe god together. Granny C shuddered and she muttered. He has treated the battle-axe god as a sacrificial offering as well, offering him to some ancient being along with the blood river, summoning that being to descend. Qin Mu didn't research much about sacrifice, and his attainments were actually inferior to Granny C. Even so, he could see that the battle-axe god was in a bad position. This battle-axe god wore armor, and there were already droplets of blood slowly flowing out. It floated into the air and fused with the blood river. Not only that, the battle-axe in his hands and the armor in his body were all starting to lose the essence. That devil god's sacrificial method was simply too powerful. The god that wielded the battle-axe was already much weaker than before, and he had already become frail. The chi and blood he lost, the harder it would be for him to defend against this sacrificial rite. The devil god that Granny had killed just now was probably one of the top-notch sacrificial rite expert. You killed an extremely important devil god. Qin Mu looked at that god that wielded his battle-axe and he cried out. Granny C said sorrowfully, "But I can't save that god on the altar. We will only send ourselves to death if we rushed into the sacrificial altar. We can't stop this sacrifice, nor can we stop the descent of this ancient existence." On the sacrificial altar, that battle-axe god charged left and right, yet he was only exhausting himself even more. Finally, he gave up on fighting back and stood at the peak of the sacrificial altar, raising his head up the sky to look at something. This was the end of a god's road, and he was about to be broken down as a sacrificial offering, becoming the fertilizer for another ancient being. I should have died long ago. The voice of that battle-axe god traveled over, and he sounded slightly bleak. He stood on the sacrificial altar and spoke loudly, his voice traveling far and wide. He muttered to himself, I should have died long ago. I should have died in the disaster 20,000 years ago. I should have died with my comrades on the battlefield. I shouldn't have laid dormant. I shouldn't have turned into a stone statue in great ruins. I shouldn't have struggled on whilst at death's door until now, to protect some bullshit hope, some bullshit future. Qin Mu and Granny C were stunned. They looked at the god on the sacrificial altar, and even though they wanted to save him, they were helpless. That god knelt down with one knee and sat down. He wielded his battle-axe to defend against this blood sacrifice. His voice became solemn. Hope, future, carefree village. We have been silent for too long, founding emperor. We have been so silent that we have lost our fighting spirit, so silent that the stone statues are frozen. so silent that the people we had to protect back then has already all died. I already can't see any familiar face, so silent that these mountains had also changed. What about you? His voice suddenly became loud, and he reprimanded the sky with a deafening voice. Founding Emperor, what about you? Where are you? The ideal world in your heart is that carefree village you are turtling in? Could you bear to see your subordinates, the old soldiers that followed you wither and die one by one? Can you bear to see the mountains and rivers shift, to see the people that you protect die from old age? Why didn't you appear? 20,000 years. Have you still not walk out from defeat? Have you not pick up your confidence up? Do you still not bear to walk out of Carefree Village? We are waiting for your summon, to fight that celestial heavens once again. Where are you? Qin Mu and Granny C heard his voice reverberating among heaven and earth. There was no one in Luofu heaven who could reply to his reproach. My goose wing, dispel with me. On top of the high sacrificial altar, in the intense blood-colored light, that God tried his best to execute his spirit weapon, and in that moment, incomparably intense light burst forth from the peak of the sacrificial altar. The light was so dazzling that it made it difficult for one to open their eyes. Without Founding Emperor, protection still exists. I, former subordinate of Founding Emperor, Heavenly Emperor Star, Alcade Division Soldier Luo Yu, shall use this broken body to protect our people, to prevent your from descending. Weapon dispel. Spirit dispel. Rays burst out and a world-shaking rumble traveled out. Terrifying pulses instantly poured out in all directions of the sacrificial altar, and Granny C immediately opened up great overarching Heavenly Star's force field to protect herself and Qin Mu. The boundless waves drowned them out. Intense rings of light swept across great overarching Heavenly Star's force field, and the ground churned like charred biscuits. As the rings of light shattered, a broken planet in the sky shifted over and raised huge overflowing waves. Yet the huge waves that stood between heaven and earth was also stopped by this explosion. Next, the waves moved back and the water spread out. This explosion was extremely short, and not long later, the surroundings of the sacrificial altar regained peace. The blood river that shrouded the top of the sacrificial altar no longer existed. On the sacrificial altar, the god and his battle axe were erased, and the broken sacrificial altar emanated blood color. That god had already dispelled his weapon and his primordial spirit, using the power of his sacrifice to stop this sacrificial rite, making that ancient being that the devil god wanted to summon be unable to descend. Qin Mu looked at sacrificial altar that was dyed blood red, and he didn't move even after a while. Granny C couldn't resist saying, "Muer, let's go." He chose to free himself, and this is a good thing to him. After all, he fulfilled his promise and completed his world. Let us head for the next sacrificial altar. Hopefully, we can meet Saint Woodcutter. Qin Mu followed her, and he didn't say anything. Granny C was slightly unused to him being like this, so she turned around and asked with a smile, "Muer, what are you thinking? This isn't like you." "I'm thinking maybe my ancestor, that Founding Emperor, he might not be the great hero I'm imagining him to be." Qin Mu was in a daze, and he said, "After I knew I'm from Carefree Village, after I knew I was the descendant of Founding Emperor, I always have a thought, and that was to become an indomitable hero like Founding Emperor, a great hero. He had supreme ideals, and there were countless heroic figures following after him. He was definitely amiable and venerable. Yet, he shook his head and remained silent for a moment. Maybe he's not that kind of person. Maybe he's just an old man that's afraid of death. He doesn't have that kind of courage, that kind of breadth of mind. He only hides in Carefree Village to live his own drunken dream. Maybe he has let down countless heroes that had followed him." Granny C blinked her eyes and burst out into laughter. "Muer, you are still a child. Why are you thinking so much for? When I was your age, Enli Tianxing has already taken a liking to me, and I was thinking about how to get rid of him. When Village Chief was your age, he was still playing in mud." Qin Mu said with a smile. Village Chief had most likely paid respects to a master and was being groomed as the next human emperor. How could he still be playing in mud? "Granny, you're joking again." Granny C saw him smiling, and she smiled. You are the child I've raised, and even though I didn't treat you well when you peed your bed and didn't want to raise you, I'm always worried you will leave me after you grow up, to leave the village. I keep thinking if you are well or not, always worrying that you will suffer. Maybe this is the mindset of a parent. I don't want you to grow up so fast and to have so many troubles. You should be carefree. It's all village chief that old fart's fault, making you a human emperor for what? After going back, old woman I is going to pour black dog's blood all over his stone statue. Coming to the surroundings of the second altar, looking from afar, there was a devil god attacking this altar and trying to take over the control. The two gods fought fiercely and the sight was astonishing. Ain't Fu Riluo afraid that Saint Woodcutter become ruthless and just sacrifice Luofu heaven? Qin Mu shook his head. Granny C put down her small flower basket and took out a pair of scissors from the basket. She took out a few cloth strips and her fingers moved up and down as she threaded the line to weave a tattered shirt. She said with a smile, Fu Riluo is preparing some tokens for negotiation. The more sacrificial altars he takes down, the more advantage he will have in negotiation. Up! The tattered shirt she just weaved flew up and flew into the battlefield. That shirt pounced and automatically wore itself on the devil god's body.